This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
6 o'clock, so let's call the North Front Range Transportation and Air Quality Planning Council meeting to order. It is April 6, 2023. Kindly join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Right behind you.
Right behind you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Before we accept the meeting agenda, Chair would like to take a little flexibility, if it's okay with you. Representative Andrew Baisnicker is to join us online. I know he's got a tight schedule, so I'd like to just come to him when he's ready. And Rep. Baisnicker, if you could just kind of indicate when you're ready, we'll certainly come to you. With that said, Chair would entertain a motion to accept the meeting agenda, please.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second to accept the meeting agenda. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
So that was,
Motion carries.
it was moved by Canonico, seconded by Stevens.
No.
It was
Oh, the other way around? Was it
Me.
you who else? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, and number 2, approval of minutes. Hopefully you've had a chance to look over the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Chair would entertain a motion to approve, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Motto, second by Councilor Canonico to approve the minutes. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Rep. Baisnicker, are you on the phone?
Hey, Commissioner James, good to hear you.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me tonight.
Oh, our pleasure. Sir, I know you are on a kind of a tight time schedule. So with your permission, we'd just like to come to you now, sir. If you have a conversation with the NPO or something you'd like to present, the floor is yours.
No, thanks. I'm all yours. Happy to talk about any bills of interest. I can just give a brief update about where we're at in the legislative session. Today, we passed the long bill, the balanced budget for the state of Colorado, out of the House. And so that bill and all of the orbitals are on the way to the governor for his signature. And with that business concluded, we're going to be off tomorrow, and then we have 4 weeks basically to complete the rest of the work on behalf of the people of Colorado. So it's going to be a whirlwind if it hasn't already been, and there's going to be a lot of bills moving through the system. So happy to touch on any ones of interest to the group, but certainly appreciate the chance to connect tonight. And thanks for the flexibility.
Of course. Any questions for Rep. Baisnicker? Please.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Rep. Baisnicker. This is Kristen Stevens. And just had a little question on the bill regarding the 10-year plan. So is that, I think it's sponsored by Mullica, and I don't know a lot about the bill, but it seems like it's wanting maybe CDOT to have some more transparency around that. Is that what that bill's trying to achieve?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Good to hear you. I am not familiar with the bill yet, and that's likely because it's a Senate bill, I'm assuming. Okay. If it comes to us in the House, meaning if it clears committee, it would likely come to one of my committees. So I sit on Transportation, Housing, and Local Government. That committee will remain active up to the end of session, I believe. Some of the other committees will collapse as kind of session moves on. I can say that I think transparency around the 10-year plan is important. I've specifically had concerns with not just transparency, but also budgeting and process with the completion of North I-25. I mean, specifically Johnstown to Fort Collins, but as I'm currently joining you from all that I-25 has to offer this evening, I think it does remain a concern, and I am certainly most interested in some sort of identified, sustainable funding source for the completion of that project and the express lanes on that route as well. So I hope that helps a little bit. I'm certainly happy to check in on the bill. If you want to send me a bill number, I can follow up with you as well.
It's Senate Bill 23-268.
Yeah, okay. So if if it's held up right now, if it's been through committee on their side, it might be held up in appropriations. So anything that has more than a de minimis spend at this point is held up until we approve the budget. So next week, you'll start to see any bills with a fiscal note, probably over $100,000, start to work their way through the system and cross chambers.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comments from Rep. Baisnaker, please?
Did you want to ask maybe specifically about anything that we have in the packet around transportation? Maybe ask.
You please do. You're leading me and I don't know where you're taking it.
Representative Baisnaker, this is Suzette Willett. I'm the executive director with North Range NPO. And we have pulled together some sort of a legislative report that identifies some transportation items that we're watching. One of them is the House Bill 1101. We know that it was in committee, and then we got some language that came out of the first committee. Our understanding is that there was a second committee set up, and I guess maybe if you know of anything that is going on with that bill or the status of it, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to update you on that one. Let me say, very tongue-in-cheek, but also with a good degree of seriousness, this is what happens when the Senate starts messing with House bills. That's a joke. I'm sorry. So 1101, yes. The longer story there is it passed out of the House on a party line vote. When it was in the Senate, Amendment L007 was added on to that bill, which created a lot of concern and also some interest from different perspectives around TPS and then specifically, I think the intent was in alignment with 260, but certainly there has been a lot of concern about what happened as a result of that amendment. So the bill came back to us in the House. We rejected the Senate amendments and sent it back to a conference committee. The first conference committee report was rejected by the Senate. My understanding is that we also have to do the same in the House, and we will do the same in the House, and that there has been an agreement reached between Senators and Senator Kirkmeyer in order to get to some conference committee language that feels closer to reasonably live with, if not object to, less. So the bill is a study, and it will not have the same implications as L007 amended the bill to have. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, I think, we obviously been watching that pretty closely because that amendment, has some obvious implications for us and also our representatives on the STAC, which is our Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee. So we appreciate that update. Yeah, and then the other one is that I thought maybe you might want to touch on is if you're familiar with House Bill 1276, is the scope for the bridge and tunnel enterprise.
Yeah, we just approved that out of committee yesterday. So that came to Transportation and Local Government on the House side of things. A lot of interest in that bill, not only because of the expanded scope of what CDOT could address, but also what I would understand to be the fiscal savings that can come and some of the safety concerns that I think come from bridges that are even listed in a fair condition. But for example, if they're over I-25 and drop concrete, a bridge in fair condition in those instances is far more risk and I think far more financial liability than one in this. I think what that bill is attempting to do is really head off problems before they become major problems and give CDOT some more flexibility to address some maintenance issues on bridges in particular, tunnels of course as well, proactively or even before they become a point of failure.
Yeah, great. I think the rest of the things we're tracking are Senate bills, so I don't know if you want to speak to any of those, but the one that is probably gaining the most attention for our group, and this is sort of a tangential to transportation, and that is Senate Bill 213, the land use bill, and I don't know if did you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, just a tiny little bill, right? Not much there.
Just a little.
So 213 is in committee today. It's in the Senate today. My understanding is there was 375 witnesses signed up to testify, either supporting, amend, or opposed to that bill. I have read through the bill. That bill will, again, most likely come to my committee on the House side of things, and certainly would welcome your feedback on that bill. I think there's a lot of intersections, rightly so, between transit goals, environmental goals, and certainly our state's long-term affordable housing plans. So I do have a lot of questions on that bill. I know it's going to be amended today. Some of the things I'm watching closely are related to, and again, probably tangential to this group, but important to mention, some of the menu of affordability options that local governments are required to develop, some of the anti-displacement and I would say anti-gentrification measures that are just listed as sort of a menu that needs to be developed. And then as well, our states, I think, focus on transportation infrastructure and the ability to impact affordable housing in transit corridors where we can also hopefully have the added benefit of reducing emissions on transit corridors as well. So that is a big bill. There is going to be a lot of amendments on it, and I would very much welcome this group's feedback on that bill, and certainly happy to advocate and take that into consideration as it moves through the process.
Additional comments for the representative? Rep. Baisnaker, I appreciate your time very much. You are welcome here anytime. Please stop by. I just had a piece of pizza the size of my head, and so there's probably some leftovers.
Well, next time I'm driving by, I'm going to swing by and say hello in person. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you today. And I believe Jenna, my aide, might be on the call as well. She'll leave you with my cell phone if she is. And if not, Commissioner James or Commissioner Stevens, happy to get that out, and certainly feel free to distribute that to the group.
We appreciate
yes,
you, sir.
I am
Thank
here.
you. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Appreciate you. Let's move on. Let's open the lead agency for air quality agenda. Under reports, number 3 is the Air Pollution Control Division report that is written and in your packet. Number 4, Regional Air Quality Council, the RAC, is written and in your packet.
Oh, sorry. That is Mike.
Oh, Mike is okay. Mike is online. Mr. Silverstein, good evening, sir.
There it is. We can't hear you, Mike. You're muted.
Clicked one too many times there. Hi, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight. I was hoping to make it up your way, but I have other obligations this evening and tomorrow morning early. So I'll join you online tonight and make a presentation to the council this evening. And really the purpose of my presentation is not to go over the air quality issues that I typically go over when I speak with you all, but to provide an overview of the Regional Air Quality Council as an organization. There are a number of questions that many of you raised during my time with you, and it led me and Suzette to think that we need to let you know who the RAC is, what our kind of foundational principles are, so that when we have further discussions, you have our organization in context. So I'd like to take maybe just 5-7 minutes here to go through a couple slides that talk about the Regional Air Quality Council, its work, and some upcoming things to take note of. So I know that you guys are running the slide deck for me, so let's continue. You've seen this graphic before. This is our non-attainment area. And the RAC was established by executive order in 1989 to serve as the lead planning agency for air quality for the Denver metro area. But that was for different air pollutants at the time, where we had smaller non-attainment areas. And with ozone coming into the picture, the non-attainment areas were much larger, and actually were expanded just last year to include all of Weld County up to the Wyoming line. And so in 2009, based on the designation of ozone non-attainment, the RAC region was expanded to cover the North Front Range area. So that's why you all see me and folks from the Air Division on a regular basis regarding ozone issues. And so each new governor reauthorizes the RAC and defines its general charge. So that's our history. Thank you. Next slide. And so we have a board of directors, and The board is made up and it's designed to represent many aspects of our community. So we have 6 representatives from local government from the Denver metro area, and we have 2 from the North Front Range governments in the executive order. We have 1 also a representative from the North Front Range NPO and 1 from DRCOG. And then we have representatives that cover many different categories, from the state agencies, members of the public, and then a fair number of our board members represent very broad and diverse aspects of our community. And so that makes up my board of 29 members. And so it's my job to engage with my board and to take their direction and turn that into action, but also adhere to the present governor's executive order, giving us our charge and our responsibilities. And so just to point out, the current board members from your region are listed here. Mayor Wendy Koenig from Estes Park, representing a representative from Larimer County, Council Member Alicia Johnson from the city of Evans, and she represents or is a resident of Weld County, and she is also our vice chair. Kristen Stevens, who you all know very well, Larimer County Commissioner from the North Front Range NPO. That's your designee on my board. And then a member from our community, Professor Jeff Collette from Colorado State University. So we have 4 members of our board that reside in the North Front Range region. Next. And so what is the RAC? And there's a lot of confusion about who we are. We are not the state. The RAC is not an agency or a department within state government. We're a 501c3 and 4 nonprofit, not-for-profit business. So even though we have an executive order from the governor that gives us our charge and the governor appoints our board, we don't receive an allocation of federal or state monies as an organization. So we're not an arm of the state. But it is confusing, even for me sometimes, as to where we sit. But we are a private entity that works very closely with the state. And so our operations and programs are funded through grants and contracts. So we don't, again, receive direct allocations for our staff or for our work. We go and we seek out monies to fund ourselves. And so what do we do with these monies? We do our planning work. That's primary work that's in the governor's executive order to work to meet the air quality standards and improve climate conditions, and specifically preparing the next ozone SIP. There always seems to be a next ozone air quality plan, and we're beginning to work on the next one, and one will be in front of my board here in just a few months. We implement public education and outreach and awareness programs. Very importantly, we implement public and private projects to reduce emissions. So we search for monies to establish programs that actually make an air quality difference, and then we fund those. And then we also represent and assist local governments in the air quality planning process. So that's why we have so many members from local government on our board, and it's part of our charge to represent local government in air quality. Next. And so what's our budget? Where do we get our resources? Every year is different, of course, depending on the grants and the contracts and programs. But here's a snapshot of what 2023 looks like, our present budget. So we have an $8 million budget. It's a projection. We don't know what our budget is really till the end of the year, like most organizations. So we project based on our programs, our grants and contracts, of $8 million worth of activities for this year. Local governments contribute about $300,000 to that $8 million budget. And the North Front Range communities contribute approximately $50,000. Our planning and programs are funded primarily through the Department of Health and Environment to a tune of $5.5 million. Most of that money comes from a federal settlement of the VW diesel cheating scandal. And most of that $5.5 million, at least $5 million of it, goes for vehicle emission control programs. And so it's not our money, it's just we help manage that program. And then we also get CMAQ monies. You all are familiar with the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program. And those are grants from the Denver Regional Council of Governments for the most part, and also from you, the North Front Range NPO, to the tune of approximately $2 million this year. And our expenses, well, they better match up to our revenue. And it's the same number, about $8 million projected for 2023. We have to pay the bills, we have to have staff. So about $1.4 million for the work of the RAC. And that's our salaried employees, our contractors, and the benefits and the administrative expenses. But most of that work is done. We just don't sit around, collecting paychecks. We do the work of the organization, and this is the amount of money that is allocated to staffing. And then we do a lot of technical analysis, a lot of modeling and research, and it's about 1.7 million for this calendar year. But also for education and outreach, which is really the primary expense, our summertime air quality program to do outreach and education. And so those two activities make up that amount. And then, as I said before, about $5 million for programs. And most of those monies are distributed directly to the public by request or by application. And most of that is through the VW's settlement program for vehicle emission controls. So that's just a quick look at our budget, what the monies that are coming in and the monies that are going out. And then to focus in the next slide for our relationship, our financial history between the RAC and the North Front Range MPO. Over the past 20 years, I've gone back to look at the records of what we've pushed out or what we've spent in the North Front Range region. And that comes up to about $2.7 million of monies that we've collected through grants and contracts and contributions to the North Front Range individuals or governments in your region. So that's the amount of money we've pushed your way over 20 years. And so when I go by county, it's not to Weld County or to Larimer County, it's to residents, businesses, or governments within the various counties. You can see the breakout. It's about 50-50, 1.3 million for Weld County and 1.2 million for Larimer County, and mostly for vehicle emission control programs, retrofit and electrification projects. So this goes back to many years where we were doing school bus diesel retrofits to cleaner diesel emission reduction programs, transitioning over to alternative fuels, and now to electrification. And we also do a lawn and garden electrification grant program and incentive program, and we're at about $200,000 for your communities. And then recent years, what have you all contributed to us, which we very much appreciate. So just as you all may be aware, the RAC every year makes a request to each local government and county within your region for contribution to the RAC, to our general fund, for our general operations. So we've, this past year and the year before, about $50,000 is given to the RAC by North Front Range communities. And that's about 6 to 8 North Front Range governments typically contribute to us each year. So there are, of course, many more local governments, but as we work with you all, we're trying to grow that contribution list and show you that the good work we do more than pays for itself in either incentive programs to your citizens or your monies to your local governments for programs. And so also the North Front Range MPO has generously granted to the RAC $100,000 during recent years for ozone modeling and technical analysis. So helping us do the good science and planning for our ozone air quality plans. And so that's a snapshot of this financial history between our two organizations. Next slide. And so opportunities. So this is, I think, my last slide. So we hope to continue our joint air quality planning activities and improve on those. So again, here's a list of things that we do together. Ozone SIP development. We are working with your staff and many of you in different ways to put together the next ozone plan and the recommended emission control programs that would go with them. The technical analysis and studies that support our work, the emission control strategy development. What strategy should we focus on to gain emission reductions? We also work with you very closely on transportation conformity determinations, helping in establishing what the emission budgets are that your board needs to work with staff on to achieve, and working with your staff on the technical elements in the conformity process. And then also program development, funding underlined, because I'm always looking for funding, and implementation. We have our lawn and garden electrification programs up and running, and we encourage citizens and local governments in your communities to apply for free money from us. Education and outreach efforts, expanding programs into the North Front Range, which currently don't exist, that may be existing in the Denver metro area. And it's a funding issue. Where do we get our money from? We have to spend it in the regions that are giving us our monies for the most part. But we want to expand that. Vehicle miles travel reduction efforts, targeting businesses and citizens. How can we get folks to drive less? Working collaboratively to gain progress in this area. And I know you all do that too. Tailpipe emission reductions, anti-idling, auto maintenance and repair, diesel maintenance and best practices, looking for funding for those programs and other programs as they come up. And so the reason why I've listed these programs out for you today is that you might be hearing from the RAC in future meetings and through other funding processes that the North Front Range MPO announced. We hope to expand our efforts and into your region to a greater degree. And there's also always a need for more money. And if there is opportunities to apply for funds through the North Front Range MPO to disseminate back into your region with our well-established and effective programs, we hope to do that. So that's just a little heads up that you might see the RAC in that process more so in the future than you have in the past. And I think that's it. I think that's my last slide today, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you all may have.
Questions for Mr. Silverstein, please. Please, Johnny.
Hey, Mike, it's Johnny Olson, City Greeley. One of the questions I have is Senate Bill 260 sort of implemented 4 new enterprises, the air quality with CDOT, and then the 3 that are under the Colorado Department of Health. That program is basically doing a lot of the same things you're doing. Those programs, how are you coordinating with them, and are you going to see any of that Senate Bill 260 money in the future?
Well, we sure hope so. We are just waiting for opportunities to apply for monies. We have not heard of announcements of funding opportunities to this date. And so we are monitoring the activities of the enterprises, 2 in particular, the air quality enterprise, which is more of a research and monitoring enterprise that they fund, that more the science of things. And we have an application or at least a proposal into that organization. We're waiting for an announcement of an official funding opportunity. And the next is the non-attainment enterprise run by CDOT. And that one is really our best hope of gaining monies to help fund the programs that I outlined in that last slide so that we can gain additional emission reductions with well-established programs and new emerging programs as folks dream them up. So we hope to take full advantage of those, but we're just waiting for the call for projects and funding opportunities to come from those enterprises. But they don't work with us directly. We're not part of the state. They don't ask us, our perspectives, unfortunately, I wish they would. It's up to us to approach them and let them know what we're all about, just like I'm doing here tonight with you all, to say we're ready for application to deploy good projects, and we're hoping that we get selected down the road.
Additional questions for Mr. Silverstein? Mike, it's Scott James in Weld County. When you do technical analysis, I'm curious as to the data set that you use. Where do you obtain your data?
Sure, lots of different places. Much of the industrial source emissions are reported by industry to the state. So the state requires industrial facilities, whether it's a power plant or a refinery or a asphalt batch plant or an oil and gas operation, whatever it might be, to report on a regular basis its emissions. So it's up to the industry to report on a regular basis based on their permits that they have already received from the state, what those emissions are on a typical summer day or on an annual basis, whatever the format might be. And so then the state adds that to its database of mobile source emissions and commercial activities, and whether it's diesel or auto exhaust, whatever it is, there's a whole bunch of different categories: commercial products, consumer products, natural emissions, vegetation emissions, transported in emissions from out of state or out of our region. Most of that is put together by the state. The RAC does very small amount of that work. We're mostly in a QA role, and we work with our contractors to take those emissions and do modeling of projected ozone concentrations for the present day and the future. but most of the emissions come from the state, which is then in part submitted by industry.
When you say it comes from I'm being rhetorical, you use EnviroScreen.
Say that again, excuse me?
You use EnviroScreen.
EnviroScreen is not used for determining what emissions would be for a particular facility or a category. There's a number of other tools that are used, but I'm not familiar with EnviroScreen's use in our work. I know it is used to determine, whether there's disproportionately impacted communities and how to identify those communities and work with to determine what air quality impacts might be, but it's not used in our analysis of what ozone concentrations would be or what emissions would be for a particular day or area.
Through Weld County's consultants Ramble, we have determined that EnviroScreen, the baseline data that they use in that is incredibly faulty, and we're protesting it in every move, quite frankly. Curious though, with the data that you use as you go to work on cranking out this SIP, will you share that rather with stakeholders? Can we get a look at the data that you're utilizing as we go to work on looking at the SIP?
Oh, absolutely, and keep your attention up. We will be announcing a stakeholder meeting on a presentation of the latest oil and gas emissions, and that's within the next month, where there will be a presentation of the latest determination of oil and gas emissions using Ramble as our contractor for determining what those emissions would be based on the state's work in the past and with industry and other stakeholders' contributions in this process that's been going on for the past 3 or 4 months. And so that the oil and gas emissions will be available, and all of the rest of the inventory database is already out there, because we presented all this information last fall, and the plan was pulled back because of some technical errors in the oil and gas sector emission inventory. And so we're not changing any of the emissions for consumer products or vehicles or all of the other categories, industrial facilities. The only thing that really got close scrutiny was the oil and gas emissions, and we hope it's a much better inventory. We're lead on working with the contractor to prepare that O&G inventory, and it'll be available for public review here in just a short while.
Thank you. Additional questions for Mr. Silverstein, please. Seeing none, sir, thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Good evening.
Okay, number 5 under lead planning agency for air quality agenda is the North Front Range NPO air quality program updates. That one, since Medora is not well today, is written in your packet. Okay, let's close that out. Go to the Metropolitan Planning Organization agenda under reports. Number 6, the report of the chair. I have no report. The pizza was too much. Full.
That's good.
Quick report. Number 4, Regional Air Quality Council, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong place. Number 7, Executive Director reports. Suzette, please.
So I do have a few things that I wanted to talk about. I know we had Representative Bosnick run earlier. We were talking about some of the bills, but I wanted to flag some of those for you. This was in your handouts that was sent out yesterday. So just, I think we talked about 1101, where that one was at. So there in front of you in each one of your places, I had this piece of paper. This was the amendment from the first conference committee. So now my understanding is that they're now setting up a second conference committee that's now going to say, we're doing away with the first conference committee and we're setting up the second one. And so then the work starts all over again. So I think that's where that's at, but that's the language that you have in front of you from the first conference committee on that one. I think the bridge and tunnel enterprise, we touched on that. Essentially, what's happening now is that for a bridge or a tunnel to be eligible for funding through CDOT, that has to meet a certain threshold with certain criteria. What this is changing is, say, for example, if you're talking about I-25 and the northbound bridge meets the criteria, but the southbound bridge doesn't, this allows them to do that southbound bridge as well, just because in there, you're getting it done all at once. And that southbound bridge may be coming up in a year or two anyways. So that's what this is intended for. And then let's see, what else was that other one? I assume Commissioner Stevens may want to talk about the retail delivery fees, as that had some indirect implications for the non-attainment area enterprise and changing those. This one is waiving some of those fees. And then there is the last one that just came up just a few days ago, which is Senate Bill 268, which is the 10-year transportation plan information. And I think this is just a reporting of the 10-year pipeline of projects, the planning at CDOT, that the state legislature wants to see some more information on, I believe. So that's sort of the highlights of what I've got in here, and I'm not an expert on any of this, but more than happy to take any comments back.
Comments? Please, John.
So a couple questions on this amendment. I think they're going to a second conference, but one, what is transit vehicle revenue miles? What does that mean? I've never heard that term, and I've been in this business a long
You want to
time.
answer that, Alex?
It's the number of miles that the bus is in revenue service. So it's when the bus is moving and picking people up compared to deadhead miles. So it's how far the bus travels when it's in service. It gets reported to the National Transit Database every year.
Okay. And then second, when you talk about vehicle miles traveled, we don't have an ability to track the actual vehicle miles traveled. How are we calculating that? Because, I mean, how do you know when a vehicle's traveling? You don't have monitors. We did the pilot program at CDOT many years ago, but we've never rolled any vehicle mile travel index out.
No, but we do have the traffic counts and that we from all the local governments and CDOT. And then those get aggregated up to either AAD, I think they go to AADT or ADT.
So it's not an actual, this is how many, I mean, because we're not capturing, I mean, they only count the road every other year, right? So they don't have, it's not actual.
Exact.
Yeah, it's high level estimations of vehicle miles traveled. It's not like there's 4,000 vehicle miles traveled on 34 every hour. We don't know how to, we can't track that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out, I mean, yeah, if you want to do, like, there's so many vehicle miles traveled in a year and you really run an algorithm and a formula to get that, but we're not doing that. I haven't heard.
No, and I think the important thing of this amendment, I know this is sort of going away, but you're looking at all that data, this report is due by November 30th of this year. So that's a lot of data to collect in a short amount of time.
Alex is going to be doing a little moonlight work over here.
Thank you.
My thought on this is, it was heard on Stack today that the Attorney General offered his opinion on 1101 with the inclusion of this amendment. He said the inclusion of this amendment in his ruling would make the bill out of line with the single subject rule of the state of Colorado and thus be unconstitutional. So it's interesting to see if this indeed will move forward with 1101 attached, or with the amendment attached to 1101. Additional comments for Suzette?
That's just my first report.
Oh, that's your first. What? There's more?
There is more. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to, that in your packet, and I don't have page numbers on this one, so I will tell you the last page number that it's in. This is the Van Gogh report. So this is on page 14, starting on page 14 of your packet. So I just wanted to touch on this. This is really easy for us to say. We stick this in here quarterly, and we don't really talk about the Van Gogh program very much, but I wanted to point out some things to you. First of all, if you look at this first graph that is up there, it changes color pretty dramatically between these screens. So the first graph that's up there, when you're looking at the active van pools and the occupancy rate, you can see that we're starting the active van pools and the occupancy rate. We're right now about 65% occupancy. Our vans, we're about 27, 28 active vans on the road. The sweet spot, which is where we were pre-COVID, is about 80% occupancy. You want to have some occupancy available so that people can join the program, but not too much. So that's so we're still not quite back to where we were before the pandemic. Obviously, the Van Gogh program has shrunk in about half from what it was before the pandemic. And if you could scroll up, just, oh, no, you don't need to, it's just my screen is messed up. So in the blue box, that stacked bar chart, where you see that 332,000 in revenue coming in, that is a lot of selling off of vans. We sold 23 vans recently because the program has shrunk so much. And guess what? Used vehicles are at a premium right now. So we made quite a bit of money just in van sales. The flip side of that is that we have a contract with Peterson Toyota in Fort Collins, and that's where we purchased the last round of vans from. We do have a contract with them now. Unfortunately, Toyota is not even telling their dealerships when they will start producing vehicles. So we don't really know what's going to happen, and it's sort of like everything's gotten quiet, so we don't know really what's going on. But I wanted to point that out to you, that's where that big hunk of revenue came from out of the Van Gogh program. And we've only bought 2 new vans in that time frame, to keep the fleet up to date. So I just wanted to let you know. So we do have 28 vans. We keep about 30% in backup, just so that we do have some backup vans for when they need to go into service. Or when we get a new van pool and we need to get a new vehicle set up to go. So, so I think if you look at the next, there you go, that pie chart. This is the miles saved year to date. And this is just from the beginning of it. This is for 2022, I believe. So that's the amount of miles that van pooling has saved. So we do a pretty good job, even with a reduced van pool fleet on the road. We have 77 van poolers, and the best practices, I would say the North Front Range NFRMPO van pooling program is one of the few in the country that a lot of people come to and say, how do you get this running? How do you make this work? And all of you are well aware that we did some changes to policy temporarily through COVID, and that did help retain van poolers. And so I think I wanted to give you an update on what's going on. We are starting to reach out a little bit more and do some more outreach as the TDM program starts coming online. We have had some conversations with Estes Park about potentially starting a van pool to Estes Park. So all of that is happening. So that's that one. The other thing I wanted to mention is, and Alex, I'll give you a minute if you want to pull up that link to the 2050 RTP meeting. I don't know if you have that handy or not. And while he's pulling that up, because I don't know that we talked about that ahead of time, but there is a report out. It's called the Model Long Range Transportation Plans, a guide for performance-based planning, and this is an FHWA document, which hence the really long title. But North Front Range NPO was mentioned in that as a best practice. So I just wanted to say that all our staff is doing a great job on performance-based plan reporting, and there's that link right there. And then the last piece is the 2050. Did you want to mention that? I don't think I have any documentation in front of me for that one, Alex.
Sure. So next Wednesday and the following Thursday, we'll be hosting 2 meetings with elected officials. We invited every elected official from every community in our region, and the time it is dedicated to a little bit explaining what the NPO does, why people should care, what we're trying to achieve, and then an introduction to the regional transportation plan, what we've been doing, what we need to do, where we need feedback, and then the rest of the meeting is dedicated to questions, comments, feedback. So this is time dedicated specifically to the elected officials to weigh in on gaps, concerns, vision, anything related to the transportation system.
You don't want any of us there, though.
Well, you can be, but this was really trying to reach out to all of the Greeley City Council or Loveland City Council or, I think any of the boards or commissions. So that was really the intent, is to make it expansive.
Yeah, did you send us that email? Because I want to make sure I get it to, I must have missed it.
Yes, I did. I sent out a reminder yesterday, but if you didn't get it,
I'll look again, because I could have went somewhere else. I want to make sure I get it to all the council members that don't. For me, I think just being there would be bad, because I don't want to be answering.
Don't
any
ask a lot of questions, John.
Huh?
Don't ask questions.
No, but I'm afraid that someone's gonna ask me. I don't want to be answering any questions, but I'd like the other council members to go and see what we're doing and not hear it from me.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could go back and talk to your other council members and commissioners to
We
get them.
all got invitations. I mean, our whole group got invitations, so. I think people probably got invitations.
And it will be recorded and we'll post it to our website. So for council members or commissioners or trustees that aren't able to attend, we will make sure that what gets talked about is sent out. And yeah, if there's any questions or
Are you
anything.
sending out the recorded link to everyone that you're inviting afterwards?
Yeah. So apologies for all the emails, but I figured it's better to get it out there. And if you delete it, you delete it, but it's out there.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I think maybe the last piece on that one is that we are working with Laramie County with the county meeting that has some of the other elected officials, the other elected communities, with all elected officials to do a presentation at the end of June, for the Laramie County side as well. So, but doesn't mean you can't participate in the virtual. That's all I have.
Okay. Questions for Suzette, please. Number 8 we've done. Number 9 is the TAC report. It is written and in your packet on page 12. Mobility is a handout. It is written. And 11 is the Van Gogh dashboard, which was just discussed. Let's move on to action items. Number 12 is the 2050 RTP goals, objectives, performance measures, and targets from Jerome. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everybody. So, I'm sorry, this is a little repetitive, but I decided to come and bring the information we can make a full decision. So first, what is GOPMT? That refers to goals, objective performance measures, and targets. Goals is referring to the key desired outcomes for the region, and that is our first step when we developed our vision statement, which we'll be seeing in a moment. Objectives, those are needed to help accomplish our goals. And then, of course, our performance measures, they're used to establish our targets and as kind of our way to assess how our transportation system is doing. We have both the federally required performance measures and then the regional performance measures, which we'll be speaking about the regional performance measures later. And then with targets, that is the value that can be achieved. That's the raw number. That's the thing that really, not that we really care about, that's kind of deliverable, no problem. So next is our vision statement. This is our proposed vision statement for the 2050 RTP, which is to ensure the multimodal transportation system in Northern Colorado is safe, socially and environmentally sensitive, and strengthens the region's quality of life and economic vitality. So then we have these nice visuals for our 2050 goals and objectives. In no particular order, we have regional health with the corresponding objective of improved economic development, residents' quality of life, and air quality. Multimodal with the corresponding objective to improve accessibility of and access to transit and alternate modes of transportation. Mobility with the corresponding objective of moves people and goods safely, efficiently, and reliably on a continuous transportation system. And then operations with the corresponding objective of optimized operations, planning, and funding of transportation facilities. There we go. So this is just a nice visual of how it all comes together. I will now go through each section of this visuals to kind of talk about how the performance measures and the goals all come together. So the first one we'll look at is regional health. And for those performance measures, we have our PM3 system performance measures, which includes the CMAQ emissions reduction, the non-single occupancy vehicle travel, the peak hour excessive delay, and then as you can see, I did add an asterisk to GHG emissions measure. It is going through rulemaking at this point, but eventually we will have to set a target on that measure. And with that one, it goes similar, and that is a federally required measure, and it will go through the same process. CDOT will set a target, and then we will have 180 days to either set our own regional target or support the state's targets. You will hear more about that measure once it's finalized and once we have to go through target setting. And once we do that process, it will be included into our GOPMT. And then we have our regional performance measures, which is percent of non-SOV commuter trips and daily VMT per capita. Next is mobility. And the performance measures with that one are our PM1 safety, highway safety measures, our PM2 infrastructure condition, so that's pavement condition and bridge condition, and then some more PM3 measures, including peak hour excessive delay again, and truck travel time reliability, and also our transit safety measures, and then the regional performance measure of travel time index on regionally significant corridors. So then our next section we're going to look at is our multimodal, and with this one, it is all regional performance measures. There are no federally required measures that address this particular goal. And for this one, we have population served by paratransit, fixed route revenue hours per capita within service areas, non-motorized facility miles, and daily VMT per capita. And then our final one is operations. So that one we have our transit asset management performance measures, as well as some more of our PM3 measures, which is travel time reliability and peak hour excessive delay. And then we have the regional performance measures of project delivery, which that's referring to the projects requiring more than one extension, devices connected by fiber, and once again, travel time index on our regionally significant corridors. So just as a reminder, we last adopted our current regional performance measures in 2018 for the 2045 RTP. And these measures, they are aiming at reflecting our regional priorities that are not covered by the federal performance measures, so we can have a more holistic approach on monitoring our systems. And again, to emphasize, these are not required by federal law. These are created by the NPO, and we decide what we want to do with them. It is entirely within the NPO. So we did have some targets that we are recommending to change from when you last heard from me. So I will go through those as they come up. This one is not one of them. So for population within paratransit demand response service area within the NFRMPO boundary, we are recommending the target of at least 75%. This is one that we did choose to change. And this is fixed route revenue hours per capita within service areas. So first I'd like to note the 0.65 and 0.45, those are ratios, and the ratio is revenue hours divided by population. Originally we recommended maintaining the 2045 RTP target, but we did some more model runs and some more model analysis, and we found that, and I have some numbers, that we're predicting by 2050, we are predicting a 150% increase in revenue hours, while the population will increase by 63%, according to the model. Taking all that to account, we can reasonably assume that we can raise that target to 30%, and that could be achievable. So since there was changes to this, I will leave a second for any questions or comments before we move on to the next one. All right. This next one changed based off of council feedback. Our original target was 6,500 miles, and we changed it to be tied to our population. So to be 7.62 miles per 1,000 people. The 7.62 comes from our active transportation plan that was adopted by council in 2021. Are there any comments and questions on this one? Next, this is another one and the last one that we have changed, and this is percent of non-single occupancy vehicle commuter trips. And this one changed because we received additional data. We did some analysis on the 2021 American Community Survey data that was released, and we found that work from home and telework seems like it's staying up. And we also, it also aligns with our TDM strategies that came out of our TDM plan, as well as the work we're doing with our air quality work that we did with the greenhouse gas emission, not the emissions report, the transportation report, and then our 2022 RTP update. Taking all that to account, we can reasonably assume that we can raise this target and that can be achievable. Oh, are there any comments on this one?
Yeah, can you go back one?
So there we go.
What do you, I'm confused. So current status is 26.8. That's where we're at today.
Yes.
The RTP baseline is 23%.
Mm-hmm.
And our target in 2045 was 25%.
Yes.
And you want to raise the 25% by 40%.
So no, so now the new target's at least 40%. So now it's at.
Replaces.
Yeah, it replaces that.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Councilman Brackey has her hand raised.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm online tonight. Thanks for letting me participate this way. I guess the question I have on this one, and maybe it applies holistically to all of these, is I understand you have a target, but how does that target compare to the target for our air quality and our greenhouse gas reduction goals? We're trying to get to very ambitious goals across the Front Range, across the state. And these targets to me read like they're just sort of existing in isolation. And I don't understand, how does this 40% compare to what is needed in order to accomplish our emission reduction goals, for example? What does it need to be versus what are you showing it proposed to be?
So are you referring to what came out
Well,
of our like G
yeah, so like this
our
one, what do you have to do for non-SOV commuter trips in order to achieve the air quality and the GHG reduction goals? How much do you need to move the needle in this category in order to get there?
I do not know that off the top of my head. Do any of my fellow staff know off the top of your head?
I was just gonna say, my knee-jerk reaction is that this will be something that will go into the scenarios in the regional transportation. I circle yelling. I know. I would say that this is something that will go through the iterative process as Medora does modeling in our scenarios for the regional transportation plan, because we will have to do that greenhouse gas report again. So I think right now this is our target, but I think we'll be doing a better job of the storytelling between this target and what your question is, Commissioner Brackey.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if that's articulated in the action item, that it's necessary to draw that connection. If it's a future step of your planning process, that's fine, but it should be articulated that this is the first step in an iterative process that will have to reach alignment with those broader goals. I could say the same thing about safety and Vision Zero. So I think my concern with this action item tonight is that it's missing that connection to what are we trying to achieve more holistically, and how do these tie to that?
So I'm going to ask this because I'm not sure that I think this happened, but I think there was some look at the transportation report that we completed for the greenhouse gas emissions analysis that we did last year. So we're looking at that report and comparing that report to what is going into these performance measures. Now remember, these are just NPO performance measures. We still have the federal performance measures that are guiding us in safety and things like that. So this is just what the NPO is saying we also want to track. And so I think because they were using the greenhouse gas transportation report from last year, that does help set that baseline for where they want to go with these reductions.
Well, that would be very helpful, and I would have hoped that did take place. When I read the packet of materials, that was not clear to me, that there was that these pieces of data and analysis are being connected together, and that one is informing the other, because the report that was produced and provided to the CDOT and the Transportation Commission was very well done and very ambitious and had a lot of information in there. It should be being used to inform these targets, and it should be, in my view, clearly articulated that it is. We're not hoping that it is, but we're sure that it is, and that we can draw the thread from that analysis to this, and then the future steps in the planning process. I don't know if other members, I can't see the room on my screen, but if others have similar concerns, but I'm trying to understand the whole picture, and how do we communicate this not only among the folks that work on this on a regular basis, but to our broader audiences that are saying, how is the work being done, and how are the measures and targets being set that are going to guide our future investment to make sure that we are on track to hit those ambitious targets? So that's something that's, I feel like is at least, it's been missing from the information I've seen. If it's in there and you can articulate that somehow tonight, that would be great. The other one that I've not seen at all is equity. And I understand these are just the MPO goals, and there's all the federal ones, and we're going to talk more about those later tonight. But I would hope that social equity would be an important MPO goal as well. And again, it ties back to Senate Bill 260. It ties back to federal infrastructure bill and funding and environmental justice. So I feel like there's some things missing here, and maybe it's just me. So I'm curious if others have similar thoughts or different thoughts.
Well, I think one of the goals has social, environmental, and economic. I think one of our, what one was it? Mobility?
I can go back.
One of them has that in it. Now, I don't know if we haven't gotten there yet, but go, keep going.
See, I think you're referring to the vision statement.
Oh, okay.
Which,
right,
Well, and
that,
we don't
that's
want to
what
have
I,
two.
it's good that it's in the vision statement, that's great, but I didn't see it show up anywhere around the performance measures or targets.
Yeah, I think that maybe to address your question about why are we not showing like disadvantaged inner areas and things like that as a goal, because we don't want to have duplicates. I mean, like, what's the point of having two performance measures that say the same thing, which is why you're not seeing that in here, in just the MPO's version of it, because we have that somewhere else. And so it's all in there, and maybe the best thing to do would be to package all of this together, which I think is what this one, the page that says, that has the little icons on it. Can you go to that one?
yeah. Is this what you're referring to?
Yeah, so that's the one that shows everything that's in there. This is all the federal and all of the, and all of the MPO. So when you're looking at this one, that's where you see the safety, and I can't read all, my screen is a little scrunched. The travel time reliability, the greenhouse gas measures, those are all the things that are tied into this one. So this is the overall picture of the performance measures, and that what Jerome was just presenting was just the MPO's portion of what's on that list.
I would also note that this will all be included in our system performance report. So when we're developing that report, we can add more of that storytelling aspect and make those comments, ensure that equity is considered when we look at all of this, and that will be included with the plan.
This is helpful to see, and I have read through this. I guess I'm still not seeing where it's specifically called out here for equity. For example, population served by paratransit. Then we have service areas, facility miles, and BMT per capita, but I'm not seeing like concentrations of, disproportionately impacted population served, or access to jobs, or, so anyway, I'm struggling with it. If it works for everyone else, that's fine, but it feels like there's more explicit things here that I'm not seeing. And I still don't understand how.
You certainly reached a vote against it.
So can I ask a question?
Please.
So is equity in the federal spelled out more? I mean, in our performance measures, is it spelled out more?
So there is no federal equity performance measure. Equity is part of the entire RTP and part of all of the plans and work that we do. So this is just specifically the performance measures and the goals and objectives that are the federally required ones, as well as the ones that we want to do that go outside of that measure other things, that look at other things that the council has wanted to look at, or TAC or staff would like to include, that are not included in these federal ones. But equity is something that is an overall piece, but is not a performance measure.
But when I read this memorandum from Anna Rose on equity resources, it takes into consideration we're taking that into consideration in our 2023 calls.
Correct.
So somewhere it says in here, staff, NPO staff created a resourcing outline of federal and state requirements for equity. So there's somewhere in our requirements that the federal and state have required this
Correct.
to do, right?
But
Whether
not
it's in
for
our
this
NPO, our NPO goals and performances, but there is our total RTP includes the federal and the state requirements that we have to put in, right?
Aside from, so these goals, objectives, performance measures, targets are a piece of the RTP, and the equity is the whole thing. It's
Okay.
within everything that we do. So RTP, the freight plan, the EJ plan, any plan that we do, the CMP, we include and consider equity in that. So that's a holistic everything piece. This is just one part of the RTP.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
I think that's what the commissioner's asking. It's in there. It's
Yes.
just not part of this
Yes,
part.
correct.
And we could, if we wanted to, I mean, in future plans, create performance measures that measure some portion. I mean, I do think somebody brought up the population served by paratransit is an example of a performance measure that, you know, speaks to equity, I would say. And so, like, we could come up in the future with more performance measures that could measure equity in whatever way we determine.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. That would be helpful. My last question on safety was, there weren't any sub-bullets under safety. Is safety specifically crash reduction, or are there is there somewhere else where it describes that more?
So the safety performance measures, that's referring to PM1, which is the federal safety performance measure that was adopted by council in February. So just to clarify, so each bolded note on here refers to different category performance measures. So there are no subcategories because safety, that's including all of PM1, which something like system performance, the reason why there are bullets are because system performance does have separate parts to go with it. And with the safety one, there's really no need to split it off because all of it fit under mobility.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
No problem. Are there any other comments on this one before we move on? Okay. So the next one is daily vehicle mile traveled per capita. And our recommended target for that is less than or equal to 24. This one is a new one for 2050 RTP, and that is projects requiring more than one extension. And this is referring to our tip delay review process and projects that require additional more than one extension, and those extensions past one goes to council. So these are projects that go to council for approval to get that extension. And our recommended target is less than or equal to 22%. And I will note the baseline year for this measure is 2019. The baseline year for the rest are whatever year it was when we first introduced that measure. Since this one is new, we chose 2019 as the base year. This next one is travel time index on regionally significant corridors. And we are recommending the target of 9% of regionally specific corridors having a travel time index of less than or equal to 1.5.
Go back. So our current status is 94.9.
Yeah, 94.9% of regionally significant corridors.
Yeah.
And I will say we chose to maintain that target because while it is above that now, as our region continues to grow and more people come in, we can anticipate that there will be more congestion, which can impact this measure. Are there any other comments on this one?
Is that the national standard too?
Yes. That's also the same standard that CDOT uses for the federally required performance measure. And we just chose to use that same for ours, just for continuity. So the next one, this is also a new one, and this is percent of devices connected by fiber and regionally significant corridors. This was not included in 24/5 RTP. This is new for this RTP. In our baseline year is 2023 because we had to gather the data. And and our recommended target is greater than or equal to 87%. Still trying to figure out those symbols. I will also note that this particular action item does not have a resolution, and it will be adopted with the resolution that adopts the RTP in its entirety. So with that, I will take any questions if you have any.
Questions for Jerome, please. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good job on a difficult topic.
Yes. So that will be adopted then after the presentation of the RTP with this one resolution right here on page 20.
Do you not need an action item for council?
We still need an action.
Yes, he does need an action to.
Okay. So there's not a resolution on this, so we're simply accepting this report.
Correct. So I would just say staff is recommending that you're adopting the goals, objectives, performance measures, and targets.
I'll move to adopt the goals and measures and target as presented in the packet.
I'll second that.
Motion by Councilor Olson, second by Mayor Pro Tem Hyde to accept the goals that are presented in the packets. Further discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Number 13 is the March 2023 TIP amendment, and the resolution is on page, or it begins on page 28. Anna Rose, please. Aye.
Thank you. The March 2023 amendment to the fiscal years 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program includes 4 revision requests from CDOT and 1 from the City of Fort Collins. The first revision is for CDOT Region 4's I-25 Segment 5 Colorado 56 to 66 project, which is adding $12.2 million of federal state legislative upper front range funding in FY24 and 25, and $11.8 million of future funding of that upper front range legislative funding, and then adding $61.9 million in North Front Range legislative funding in future year funding. The second request is for CDOT Region 4 new project I-25 and Colorado 14 interchange improvements with $500,000 federal state North Front Range legislative funding in FY24 and $27 million in future funding, and then $1 million of the Bridge Formula Program funding, and $2 million of the state 7PX funding in FY23. The third request is adding another new project, US 85 and US 34 interchange, with $6 million federal state legislative upper front range funding in FY24. And then the last revision request from City of Fort Collins is to add the new project, Bus Rapid Transit State of Good Repair, with $614,000 federal FTA 5337 funding and $153,000 local funding in FY23. The 30-day public comment period began on March 8th and ended today, and no comments were received on this amendment. An environmental justice analysis was included for the 2 new location-specific projects and are included in the packet. We presented this to TAF at their meeting in March, and they have recommended incorporating the TIP amendment into the TIP. So I will answer any questions.
Questions for Anna Rose, please.
I've been doing this a long time, and I don't know what BFP stands for.
Bridge Formula Program.
Okay, and then 7PX.
So 7PX is Senate Bill 228 and Senate Bill 267 funds.
You should. I've never seen it called 7PX.
And so it's some of the Tier 1 project 10-year plan funds.
I just need 267 and 228 funding, that's all I need.
Yep.
As we age, concepts get more difficult sometimes.
Well, that's not even a 3-letter acronym. That's a number now. I mean, we've got a lot of TLAs, but that's not even a TLA. That's a number and 2.
Further questions for Anna Rose, please.
Does the Fort Collins project include any, so is that some of the rolling stock for the bus rapid transit? Will that include any electric buses?
I don't
Probably not.
believe that one was for, let's see.
It's probably too
Yeah,
little bit
it's
of money
just,
to do that, right?
I think it's just the current rolling stock that they have.
Additional questions, please? Seeing none, the proper, excuse me. Thank you, Ambrose. Proper action would be to adopt resolution number 2023-07, which is found on page 35.
I move adoption of resolution number 2023-07, approving the March 2023 amendment to the 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Program.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Stevens, second by Councilor Olson to adopt resolution number 2023-07. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, Ambrose. Are you next too?
I'm just about the rest of the agenda.
Yeah, all right. Just get comfortable. Number 14 is the 10th Street Access Control Implementation Project Funding Exchange. Ambrose, please.
So I just want to introduce this topic before handing it over to Paul Trombino from the City of Greeley, just to explain kind of what we're going to be asking from council tonight and the background of it. So the City of Greeley has asked to exchange some funds for 2 of their federally funded projects. And so the process that we go through for a request like this is to bring it to our TAC, and they can decide if the scope of the change is minor enough to be completed with a tip modification, or if it's more major in nature and needs to go to Planning Council to approve. And so that's why we're bringing that tonight, is we discussed it with our TAC at the meeting in March, and they decided it was a major scope change, and so wanted to get council's approval of this. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Paul now to go over the details of the project. Oh, let me pull it up, sorry.
Oh, Mr. Trombino, how are you, sir?
Good evening, Chair.
There you go.
Thank you, Ambrose. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight and talk a little bit about 10th Street and the Access Control Project. Obviously, this was awarded back in 2014. The project commenced during essentially 19 and 20 and finished up in the latter half of 2020. During closeout, so we worked pretty hard to try to close out this project for quite a while now. And the challenge really became the contractor did not have required Buy America documentation. There was a number of steel pieces on the project overall. And as a result, in working with CDOT, kind of went back and forth a number of times to try to find opportunities to close out the project. We ended up rescinding the funding and accepted that from CDOT's perspective. And as you can see there, it's just over $2 million. And part of that process was really, I think it was important for the city's perspective is the contractor has ultimate responsibility to provide the documentation for Buy America. We actually, at the direction of CDOT, we actually went back to subcontractors to be able to try to find documentation. We were unable to find key documentation to really support all of the Buy America requirements. And so that was the biggest challenge for us that we faced as we kind of went through this contract. As a result, what we would like to do with the rescinding is to move that to a different project so we don't lose the federal dollars. We have a project, it's obviously already in, it's 83rd Avenue roadway. It comprises a series of, this segment is a widening between near 10th Street and over the sheep, to the bridge over Sheep Draw. And so the dollars for this project, there was overmatch available in the project, as you can see. And if we move the $2.2 million in, there's still space for a local overmatch. So we're not going over anything that we could have normally potentially received in the past. So what the conversation was during TAC, as Anna Rose just outlined, was trying to figure out, one, CDOT was supportive of us to move the funding. That was the first thing. And then TAC really really felt they were supportive of the exchange request, but ultimately they felt that that needed to come before Planning Council tonight. And so the other thing to note is there is no wait list or partially funded STBG projects from any previous call projects. So there isn't anybody looking for dollars or waiting for dollars or trying to get dollars. And so I think that's why we're hoping that TAC considers this and approves this tonight. And that's just sort of what the council action would be, is to move the reallocated funding to 83rd Avenue roadway improvements. The city will have to expend out all of the dollars in local funds to cover everything on the 10th Street contract as it kind of closes out from here. And that is all I have. If there's questions.
Questions for Mr. Conlon?
Can I add to that?
Please.
One of the things, I don't know if you guys remember during the call for projects in the last call, there was some calls, waitlisted projects that weren't getting fully funded. And we ended up pulling one of our projects that all the other projects got funded in Loveland and Fort Collins. So just want to make that clear that we did give up about 2.5 million on the last call and all the projects. The reason there's no wait list is because we gave that up. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that.
What you're asking for is grace. You fell on your sword.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's called. I'll eat the sword.
I think we owe him now.
We do owe him. In my opinion, a question for staff. This STVG money is our most flexible pot of money per se, right? And so there are no conflicts in literally just moving one to the other.
That is correct. And the 83rd Avenue project was also STBG funded.
Okay.
So both of the projects were STBG funded.
So it's literally just moving one to the other, and they will fall within the requirements for the STBG money and
yes,
for kosher.
Yes.
Okay. Further questions? This is listed for discussion only. My guess is we are to indicate our preference to staff, and you would bring it forward for action next month. Is that
yes. So if council is in support of this, then we will go ahead and process the TIP amendment to move those funds, and that would be part of the May amendment cycle.
Looking for general head nods then.
Yeah.
Hey, head nods.
I'm not going to say.
All right.
Well, I'd go back to the opposite. You can whoop me up.
Anna Rose, it looks like you have a mutual head nod.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, number 15 is the 2023 call for projects preview. Anna Rose, please.
Thank you. So I wanted to bring this discussion about our 2023 call for projects, kind of quickly go over some things tonight as a lead-in to our next discussion item, and further discussions and future council meetings. So we are currently looking to open a call for projects later this year, and so we'll have several discussions over the next several months about the call for projects. We're looking to have this call open in August. There's a couple other dates listed in there, but then the final council action on the recommended projects would be in January of 2024. For this call for projects, in what was sent out in the packet, we had originally stated that we would be holding the call for all 5 funding programs, the federal and the state. So we have 4 federal funding programs. That's congestion mitigation and air quality, surface transportation block grant, transportation alternatives, and carbon reduction program. Then we have the 1 state funding source, that's the multimodal transportation and mitigation options fund. Some of you were part of the STAC meeting this afternoon or this morning, and following that discussion, we have decided to propose to not award our FY26 and 27 multimodal options or MMOF funds at this time. There are a lot of uncertainties at this time about the MMOF program. One of them being that when Senate Bill 260 was passed, they created the distribution formula for these funds, and that's what we've been using, those assumptions based on that distribution formula. But the TC is going to be revisiting that formula, and so that could change the amount of funding that we have available. At this time, we have already awarded MMOF funds for 24 and 25, which could also be impacted by the by the change in this distribution formula. And so given that and some of the other pieces that affect MMOF with the, I think, the housing and land use, decided that it would be better to wait to award those funds until we have some better answers about that. So I want to pause there to see if there's any questions about removing MMOF from this call at this time.
Having not been at the meeting, yeah, what's the reasoning for revisiting the formula? Because of the land use?
At the time that this formula was adopted, they said that they would revisit it. That was always the plan. But they're going to be starting those discussions for revisiting that formula this summer, which would be a little bit late for when we're looking to open this call.
And there could be a take back of funds that have already been allocated?
Yeah, I'll give you a political answer, and then you can give the coach. My fear, my political assessment is that 213's it's just gonna harm sweep in MMOF. My gut instinct, Kristen, and nothing more. But I would look for candor from you. I'm a bit nervous about 213.
Well, 213, right in the beginning in the summary, it does say it will use MMOF funds. Mm-hmm. What exactly and how much, it doesn't specify. But I know that they want, if with the housing, looking at affordable housing, they want CDOT to go out and look at the access codes. So I don't know if it's just to say, take some of that MMOF money to do that access code, or is it bigger than that? I don't know. But it just seems, but part of that housing bill that's being proposed, it does say that any projects awarded from 2024 on have to be in conjunction with the state housing plan. And we don't have that plan. We don't know what the plan is going to be. So to answer the question, could it get pulled back? Maybe. We don't know, because we don't know what that plan would be.
I mean, actually, the funds that have been allocated, do kind of fall in with, they're in areas that have density, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to, right?
Agreed, but until we see
Sure,
the
no,
output.
I'm not saying we should change anything. I was just curious about, but it's because 213 refers to MMOF funds, and it's unclear if they would be.
But then, so another piece of this overall discussion is with the distribution formula, which is separate from that other piece. We award our funds based on planning estimates. And so when we awarded the 24 and 25, that was based on the current estimates we had at the time. But looking at that now, we're not quite as sure if the estimates that we have at this time are going to be close to what we actually get.
I, for one, think it would be prudent to just wait and see what kind of money we got to spend for it.
And we all know that MMOF curve started here, and then it just drops off to nothing at the end anyway. And I hate the projects that were, it goes to like $500,000 in 20.
24 was about $400,000, and then it was like $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.2 million.
And I think another good reason to wait is if we do have projects that do fall into the state plan and we're good with them, but we don't have enough money now in 24 or 25 to fund those. We have 26 coming that we haven't assigned it to anything yet.
Sure.
So that would be another reason to wait.
And should the communities that were awarded, and I apologize, I can't even remember who received MMO funds, but do we need to tell those communities to spend those?
Don't spend the
money. At this, the two projects that are receiving those 24 and 25 funds are one from the city of Fort Collins, one from the city of Greeley. And so we'll make sure that we're all on the same page with that.
They're aware just of that, and maybe, okay. Don't spend the dollar if you do.
I worked for a little tiny radio station in Kansas one time where the boss would say, don't cash the check until after 3. We knew what he was doing. So it's kind of the same deal.
I just wanted to be up to speed, thank you.
Yeah. So onto the funding estimates, you'll see that this slide is different than what was sent out because this has removed the MMOF funding. So we have about 22 million funds of federal funding that we'll be awarding in this call for fiscal years 2026 and 2027. So I wanted to talk about some of the changes that will be happening in this call for projects, particularly because of the new federal regulations from IIJA. So the first big thing is that there are added project eligibilities for all funding programs, and then plus the one brand new funding program. Then the second thing is that there is a much greater focus on safety in all of the funding programs and in the guidance of these funding programs. So really encouraging safety to be a high priority within all of the projects. And then also there's the inclusion of looking at safe or complete streets in going into this, going into projects as well. The second piece that comes out of the changes to these programs is a focus on equity. So one of the really specific pieces that was added to the SCBG and TA and carbon reduction program is this language here under prioritization. So it says the competitive process described in subparagraph B shall include prioritization of project location and impact in high-need areas as defined by the state, such as low-income, transit-dependent, rural, or other areas. The guidance for these programs goes on to include that next paragraph, which was that projects, the inclusion of project elements that proactively address racial equity, workforce development, economic development, and remove barriers to opportunity, including automobile dependence in both rural and urban communities as a barrier to opportunity, or to redress prior inequities and barriers to opportunity. So this is one of the reasons why our next discussion item on equity, why we wanted to bring that to the council, as this is something that is being required within these federal funding programs to address equity in our prioritization process. So a few more updates that we'll make to this call and kind of next steps is, one thing is looking at aligning our evaluation criteria to our council's priorities. So making sure that when we go to look at those scoring criteria, that we can base that off of the priorities of our council. Incorporating federal and state requirements, so that's the safety, equity, and then also things like GHG, things like that. The addition of the carbon reduction program, which I mentioned. We also will look at defining eligible entities, so who all is available to or allowable to apply for our funding.
Explain that one.
So that would be for eligible entities will be all of our member agencies, but then also in our previous call, we had said that CDOT and RAC and partner agencies would be eligible to apply for funding. So the question is, would we still like to leave it open to that, or should those things be a set aside off the top, and what would that look like? I'm not necessarily asking for council's direction on that tonight, but that is something that we'll want to think about as we go into this process. And kind of as a follow-up to Mike Silverstein's presentation, if they're interested in applying, if that's something that we want to allow them to do. One of the set-asides, as he had mentioned, we have set aside $25,000 per year over the last 4 years for that ozone modeling and the technical work, and so we would be recommending, staff would be recommending to continue that, but that's at this point the only set aside that we have for recommendation. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I'll wait till the end.
So then a couple other things is just aligning the MPO plans and programs to the COPPER projects. So looking at the RTP goals, the congestion management process strategies, things like that, and how do those fit into the call process. So one of the things that I mentioned is that we'll be looking at what council's priorities are, and that's what the bulk of the discussion we'll have next month with council is defining those priorities or ranking the priorities, and one way that we can do this is by aligning that to the RTP goals that were adopted tonight. So within each of these categories, there's, specific things that we can look at to include scoring criteria for. So that's one way to be able to tie the work that we've done with the Go PMT into the call for projects process. I believe just next steps that we'll be looking at is, like I said, discussion with Planning Council next month on priorities. Then we will have a workshop with TAC in May to develop those evaluation criteria. And then, like I said, in August, we'll be looking to open that call.
Very good. Questions for Anna Rose, please?
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, don't be sorry. Go.
So go back to the slide where you show the dollars. I mean, you're showing me what 25, 26 and 27 is. I'd like to sort of see what previous, are the numbers the same? Are we going up? Are we coming down? Just give us a sort of an idea of what our 5-year average or something is when you come back in March, in May. And then out of all this money, CMEX 5.4 and 5.5 and 27, is out of any of these pots of money, is there any off the top that we take out of our pots to pay staff, or is there any other off the top other than the 25K?
There have been, and we took some off the top for I-25.
Yeah, I remember that one.
So it's been for projects, but not in this one, and we have taken some MMOF off the top, like we did the premium transit analysis and things like that. And we've also set aside the TMO startup. So we have done that, but it's been projects.
All right, so like if you guys came to us and said, there's 10 million, but we want to take $1 million off the top for 26 and 27 to do this project, that would come part of the discussion.
Correct.
So, I mean, we'll know that's there.
Yes.
Okay.
And also if council wants to initiate that, that's an option as well. The off the top set asides.
Awesome. And then my last question is on the criteria page that you talked about a little bit, where we got into the, one back. Go find the other. Somewhere, I don't know if you guys do this, but I mean, we are the North Front Range Regional Air Quality Council, right? And is there any scoring criteria that has a regional benefit? Because in a lot of our projects, like 10th Street, had a very strong nexus for city, really. But if we had one, i.e. US 34 that was building the transit system, or I-25 that's connecting some of the other things, is there like a regional, like bonus points or points you get for regional connection? I don't know.
Right points.
Yeah, so when we look at the goals and some of the criteria that could align under those goals, one of them is network connectivity, so being able to close the gaps in any of our networks. Some of it's partnerships, so that can be part of that as well. I think one of the other things that would like to discuss with council is the idea of 10-year plan, corridors or projects, if there's some way that you would like to prioritize those, things like that.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, looking at the regionality of projects, I think is definitely something that can fit in, especially under that mobility, continuous transportation system.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Stevens.
With the if we decided to do set aside for any reason, would that have to meet the criteria? I mean, they would have to fall under the equity, the IIJA. You'd have to make the case for those dollars still. So
yeah, they would still need to, with whichever funding program they come out of, they still need to meet all of the eligibility requirements under those.
Commissioner Bragg. Commissioner Bragg, please.
Great, thank you. So I see the one on regional health, and that has the air quality in there. Again, are the scorings then tied to the project prioritization process tied to how well they're going to help achieve the air quality and greenhouse gas emission reduction goals?
Yes, so how we've done it in the past and how we would continue to do it is looking at the emissions benefits for CMAQ, it's always been for the ozone precursors, but then we also did that with MMOF last time. of calculating the greenhouse gas emissions benefits. So that'll be part of this process as well. So that would be one of the criteria under, regional health that we would, through these processes of prioritization with council and then looking at actual points with the TAC and then bringing that back, be able to kind of finesse that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. It is just helpful to see it explicitly called out. So if it's air quality and GHG emission reduction or something like that is helpful. So thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions for Anna Rose, please, for comments. Thank you. Okay, number 16, equity resources.
Thank you. All right, so in the handouts packet, the memo was updated to include a link to the resource that we created called Equity Resources. And so over the last several years, there's been a lot of discussion of kind of the new rules and requirements coming from state and federal agencies looking at equity. So we wanted to kind of bring this all together and look at it as a whole as we go into the process of our call for projects to make sure that we're integrating that and looking at the different definitions that are used across all of these different initiatives to be able to kind of better understand that. So that's why we're bringing this this evening. So I won't go through all of the text that's within this resource, but there's a lot of information in there. But I will just go over, in general, each of these areas, some of the different definitions and how it impacts us specifically at the NPO. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the Equity Action Plan, which was released by the U.S. Department of Transportation in response to Executive Order 13985, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. The Equity Action Plan defines equity as the consistent and systemic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Native American persons, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, and other peoples of color, members of religious minorities, LGBTQ+ persons, persons with disabilities, persons who live in rural areas, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequity. The Equity Action Plan, unlike some of the others that we'll go through, doesn't define exactly where those areas are, but it's kind of more just an overarching goal for equity. How this affects the NPO specifically is with project prioritization and public participation with the NPO TIP. And so one of the action steps within that is to increase public participation and engagement in rural and urban communities for the NPO TIP. And also, it encourages NPOs to officially adopt a quantitative equity screening component in project selection and design. The second piece is to increase the number of new projects utilizing formula funds within the TIP in disadvantaged communities. So also wanted to say that how we have this structured is kind of funneling down. So looking at the big picture from the federal government and then states and then more local. So the second federal piece is looking at Justice 40. So Justice 40 was created by the federal government in 2021, and it sets a goal of 40% of the benefits of certain federal investments flowing into disadvantaged communities. And the Justice 40 does define where these areas are. And so within this resource, we've provided maps that include the areas within our region that fall under those definitions. Justice 40 is based on demographic and environmental data at the census tract level. And so some of these look at different geographies. And so we've specified that within this resource. So Justice 40 is looking at larger areas, the census tracts. And the Justice 40 is made up of different component scores that look at transportation insecurity, environmental burden, vulnerability and health social vulnerability and health vulnerability, and climate and disaster risk. And I will bring up the map that shows the areas within our region that are considered Justice 40 areas. So within the MPO, the areas that you see in orange here are the ones that are considered Justice 40 areas. So that means that they have an overall score of the 65th percentile or higher of all US Census tracts. So this is comparing the census tracts in our region to all census tracts across the United States. And within the map here, we also have each of the different component scores as well. So that transportation insecurity, so you can see that some of the areas within our region qualify under one of the pieces of the definition, but not all of the pieces of the definition. And most of the different pieces from Justice 40, disproportionately impacted, also have mapping tools that have been created to assist in identifying where these areas are. And so the U.S. Department of Transportation has developed this U.S. DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer that currently is in their experimental phase. So they've done the work but are working on getting feedback to incorporate to make this tool finalized. But all of the areas that we have mapped came from the calculations that have been done by US DOT for each of those component scores. So looking at how Justice 40 impacts the NFRMPO, one of the biggest pieces is that the 4 federal funding programs that we award through our call for projects are considered Justice 40 covered programs. So there is a high encouragement to take into consideration Justice 40 when awarding those funds. And then also this tool was developed, the US DOT tool was developed for the NFRMPO or member agencies to be able to consider Justice 40 impacts during discretionary grant application programs. So all of those programs that have been opening up from IIJA, they encourage the use of that Community Explorer and considering Justice 40 within those applications. So before I move on to disproportionately impacted, wanted to see if there was any questions about the federal pieces that I went over.
How does Justice 40 interact with the MPO's environmental justice plan? I mean, is it one of the same?
Yes. So
yeah.
What we had seen that there is a lot of overlap. So environmental justice is one of the things that we have later on, but when we calculate environmental justice areas, it's looking at low income and minority, so a little bit more narrow. Whereas Justice 40 is taking into account a lot more information, a lot of environmental and other demographic data that brings into that. So one of the things that we have done and will propose at the end is the equity index. So that's kind of overlaying all of these areas to see, what areas qualify for all of the above and what areas in our region don't.
Hannah Rose, I move we skip to that. Because I bet a lot of this is going to be the same. That's going to be my ultimate question is,
okay,
mix it all together, how do we judge projects?
Yes. So I do want to quickly talk about disproportionately impacted, because that is a little bit more specific to the MPO as well, but I will. There are all the maps there. that you can look at your leisure. But I did want to talk about that there are two separate definitions, or kind of building on definitions for justice or for disproportionately impacted. So one is looking at just the demographic piece. So that's 40% or higher of people within a census block group that qualify as low income, minority, or are housing cost burdened. But then there's the second piece of the definition, which is a community that has a history of environmental racism perpetuated through redlining, anti-Indigenous, anti-immigrant, anti-Hispanic, or anti-Black laws, or where multiple factors may cumulatively affect health and the environment and contribute to persistent disparities. So there is those two pieces that are taken into consideration with disproportionately impacted communities. But then wanted to point out that one of the ways that DI communities affect the MPO is through the distribution formula for MMOF that is going to be reevaluated. One of the criteria for that formula is the population within disproportionately impacted communities. So just wanted to point that out specifically. But I will go ahead and skip down to the equity index area and bring that map up. One of the things with environmental justice versus the Justice 40 and disproportionately impacted community is that when we calculate our when we calculate our environmental justice areas, we're looking at how each block group compares to just our regional average, whereas disproportionately impacted communities are looking at how one census block group in our area compares to the full state. And then for Justice 40 is how it compares to the United States as a whole. So that's one of the things that, that makes environmental justice different, is that it is just a more focused look at the areas within our region. So the equity index map that I've created here overlays the Justice 40 areas, the disproportionately impacted communities, and the environmental justice areas. So the darkest areas on the screen have all three of those equity areas. And then as it gets lighter, it's either 2 or 1. So as we go into the call for projects, one of the ways we can look at incorporating all of these is to, instead of just looking at environmental justice areas, looking at these equity areas. So if a project is within a quarter mile of a census block group that is 1, 2, or 3 equity areas. So any thoughts on that or further clarification I can provide?
Thoughts, yes. Further clarification. I'm curious about the concept of environmental justice. The EPA provides a definition of environmental justice, which differs from that of state legislation. Which one are we going to use?
Right. And so I think by looking at kind of equity overall, it's bringing in pieces of all of that. So in this equity, these equity index areas, we're looking at low income, minority, and all the other pieces that make up those other, Justice 40 and DI communities. So looking at housing costs and transportation access and things like that. So if that means coming up with a more simplified definition of what we are meaning by looking at equity, I think we can do that as we go into this process. But by overlaying these areas, it's kind of taking into consideration all three of those ideals.
Commissioner Bradley, please.
I just wanted to say thanks for covering this information. It's really important, and I think it is a critical area for transportation planning and transportation policy, and I appreciate the work that you've done to show holistically how all of these different aspects of environmental justice and Justice 40, all of these different pieces fit together, and this overlay map I think is really helpful, and seeing how meaningful it is at a holistic level. And I hope that it is something that's taken into account and taken seriously in terms of how to prioritize project investment in the area. Social equity is a very important area that has been not focused on in the transportation space for decades. And so I think there's a lot of emphasis on it, and certainly a lot of the federal programs, as you were describing, are really being set up and tailored to these types of investments. So thanks for the information tonight.
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really glad to see that, we're focusing on this, and, I think that it'll be a learning process for all of us, but I appreciate you kind of compiling this data and giving us an idea of where, what areas of our community we need to focus on. So will we be taking that, the suggestion of creating some kind of quantitative equity screening tool?
Like what we were talking about with the performance measures?
Right. That was one of the things that was discussed in.
Right, with the equity action plan.
Right.
So I think that, or my interpretation of that action item was like with this process that we'll have for the call for projects is how are we incorporating equity into the prioritization process, which was also one of the things that had came out of IIJA of, incorporating that into SCBG and TA and CRP funds. So by defining that within this process, my interpretation is that it would meet that recommendation.
So we wouldn't necessarily have to create a separate tool for that. We could just use.
Yeah. So what you're saying is this could be a criterion in the scoring
And
evaluation.
should be,
of
it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah.
And however we decide, to define exactly how we're doing that.
It hits non-zero, it hits 1-1, it hits 2-2, it hits 3-3. Use this index because it has it all. Don't go back to each individual one unless there's a specific call or it's for that branch. But it's gonna be really hard to sit down and pencil out all three of them and score all disproportionately impacted EJ, Justice 40, right?
That's why this is phenomenal work. The project application falls within 1, 2, or 3. But of course, that's a conversation we'll have at a later date.
Right. But one of the outcomes from this conversation I wanted to have is if this did make sense to the council and we could continue to, work through what that's gonna technically look like.
And we don't have a choice. This is executive order, it's in the IIJA law, it's in the state Senate Bill 260 law. We're pretty much, this is something we have to do. You just gotta figure out how.
Yeah. But I think it's important, to Kathleen's point, it's really important to do this work. And as we zero in on, where, clearly folks that fall into 3 or 2 or even 1 equity area are gonna need access to, transit more than folks that don't. So, I think it does sort of help us do our work better and zero in on communities that really are transit dependent and that really would benefit from this. And, the whole idea about, environmental justice is that these communities have also borne the brunt of a lot of our industry and idling vehicles and all kinds of, highways running through their communities and such. And so, it's important to do this work is all I want to say. And that I think that this is, I'm really glad to have these tools and thank you for collating them and giving us an idea of what we need to work on.
And I also think mobility means other than transit. You got ride sharing, you got, we're looking at different programs in Greeley that transit doesn't support that might be an Uber system that we put in place that we actually partner up or do something, or scooters or connecting our college to downtown. It's all in that area. So there's other ways to really actually do other than just transit. Transit's important, you gotta have that connectivity, but this can fit all those different mobility options, right?
Yeah. And, one of the things with the CMAQ program is that they have expanded eligibilities for CMAQ for things like scooter sharing and bike sharing and things like that. So
Commissioner Brackey, your hand's still up. Do you have an additional comment?
Nope, I'll put it down.
Thank you. I do have hey, thanks for work. Good job. Will County has a significant chip on its shoulder when it comes to EnviroScreen. And I just, Rambo, the consultant that we paid millions of dollars for, has shown us that the data is undoubtedly flawed. We're presenting that to legislative review, every other testimony that we're offering in every place we can, because the data simply put is flawed. That said, are we going to use DIC determination? EJ uses census tracts. The state uses EnviroScreen, which stinks. The latter was my personal opinion. So I'm just curious as to how we're going to make that determination.
Yeah, so with how we have this now, the Justice 40 uses census tracts, so the larger areas. DI and EJ look at census block groups, and so that's the smaller areas. So what we've done with this is taken the census block groups that fall within those census tracts and coded it that way. But then another, piece of this is that with Justice 40 and DI, the information that is being represented here is being pulled straight from their website. So any kind of updates that they make to that data will be reflected within that. And then one of the other things that I had looked at with that, having seen the pre-hearing statement from Weld County, is there are, I think, 3 or 4 census block groups within our region that only qualified under DI for the EnviroScreen score. So most of the areas that are covered under DI in the map are for the demographic pieces.
Good.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, we can, about the particulars, but what you're looking for is a general head nod from us saying, hey, you're on the right track. Is that what I'm picking up on? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm looking at, because I do definitely believe you're on the right track. We can debate the particulars later.
Yeah, and we'll take this to, as part of the call for projects discussion to the TAC as we go into looking at the scoring criteria, and then continue to bring that back to council in future discussions.
Additional comments or questions for Anna Rose? Because she ain't done. Are you done yet?
I'm done. I'm done.
Good. Hey, go have a piece of cold pizza.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Nice tool. Number 17, NFRMPO 10-year list of projects. Back, please.
This is a very outside. First, I need to find it. Hello. Oh, no, I'm doing the wrong thing. Oh, no. Sorry, I thought that was the page numbers. Hold on. So at the meeting in March, we discussed, or I brought to the council the 10-year list of projects as they were at the time. So the tier 1 roadway, the tier 2 roadway, the tier 3 roadway, which are sorry, I'm distracted.
Okay.
Yes, it is in your handouts, I'm sorry, that were not prioritized. And so in talking with the council at the meeting last month, there was a request to go back to the TAC to see, and there was some discussion within the council members of whether or not wanted to continue to do the corridor by corridor prioritization that had been done with the first few years of this list, which is just looking at mostly I-25 projects and getting those done and then moving on to the next corridor. Or if the council had a desire to do a project by project, so maybe it's a US 34 project and then it's a 287 project and then it's a 392 project. Sort of project by project as opposed to corridor by corridor within those 6 prioritized corridors. And so the council had requested that we take this back to TAC, and we did take it back to the TAC at their March meeting. And the TAC requested at that time to have a workshop to discuss these projects and the list more focused as opposed to being part of a meeting. So a A 2-hour workshop was scheduled on March 27th, which is why this was part of the handouts packet as opposed to being within the council packet. And so a lot of discussion happened around the projects and sort of why are we here, you know, what does the council want, what did they request, things of that nature. So at the top of this is a very beautiful green box that talks about the major outcomes from the workshop that we held last week. And so one is to keep the projects separate as opposed to, you know, combining projects or doing corridor by corridor. So keeping them separate. There was talk about a hybrid approach to the corridor by corridor and the projects ranking themselves individually. There really wasn't a consensus around that, but just there has to be a hybrid, maybe a hybrid approach. What that looks like is still up for debate. Prioritize projects related to I-25 or those projects that are touching I-25, so like the 2 US 34 projects that are here at the top. Prioritizing those over, say, something on State Highway 14 that it doesn't touch I-25. Adding a line item that is intersection improvements. So there was a discussion, I will go down here. So that is the very last line of this chart here, which is these intersection improvements along the 6 priority corridors. And so this was brought up because this meeting happened on Monday, and on Thursday there was a Region 4 intersection prioritization project meeting for all of Region 4. And so the request was, could we pull intersections that are on that list and put them, that are on our 6 corridors, and put them onto this Tier 1 list. In looking at that list, there are 12 intersections across our NPO region on 3 of the 6 priority corridors. So those are on 392, 287, and 34. So that's still going through prioritization. There hasn't been any design done. So those exact locations, those may not be the exact locations that they recommend at the end of the study. So that's why it's a little ambiguous. The next, and they were suggesting, they being the TAC members who were at the workshop, $5 million per intersection. Again, I don't have any cost estimates because they don't have any for those intersections yet. $5 million per intersection. We could do 10 intersections. That's $50 million. Just a ballpark estimate.
Yeah, you might get 5 projects at 10 million.
That was the request.
Or 4.
I don't have project estimates. It could just be 1, too. So looking at that, asking the council what to do about the full interchange projects for Spaghetti Junction and Will County Road 17. That was at the workshop. Following the workshop, there was information provided by CDOT that addressed that. And so the Spaghetti Junction project, there's an interim improvement that is on Tier 1 that should last about 20 years. The full interchange has been moved to Tier 2 since they also don't really have a project cost estimate, and so we moved it to Tier 2 for now. It can always be moved back once there is one cost estimate, that is. Highlight multimodal aspects is sort of just a overall overarching one, and then additional project sponsor comments are in bold throughout the 3 tiers of roadway. For the most part, on tiers 2 and 3, it is updates to the cost estimates from CDOT. So that's you'll see a lot of bolding on those, and it's mostly just the cost estimates for those. For this Tier 1 list, there is additional information that is needed because there's a little bit of disagreement between what we heard from the project sponsor versus CDOT, specifically for this first project, so the Larimer County Road 3 to Centera on US 34, and that's just clarification that we as staff need to do with those, with CDOT and the project sponsor, and we'll be doing that. There's also a question, there are a lot of projects related to the second project on this list in our TIP, so the Rocky Mountain Avenue to Boyd Lake Avenue, Denver Avenue to Boise Avenue. There are a lot of projects in our TIP, and we can't quite tell if this project has already been funded because the information we received from CDOT lends it to say that it has been funded, but we aren't quite sure, so that's just work that we need to do. And then a big one, you'll notice we've condensed the US 34 project in Greeley, the 35th Ave and 47th Ave, at the request of the city of Greeley to combine those. This is the merge project that was applied for. They requested that we bring it together, including the mobility hub, so that it is just one project. So we did that and combined that here. So there's a lot of information here. One thing I do want to note is we did get clarification. This was one question we also had, which was, how much funding do we have? The first time we created this list, we were told we have an NFRMPO total of 500 million for the 10 years. We have found out that we have about 55 million over 10 years. So that's about 5.5 million a year for these funds. You can look at these. There's not a single project on here that is that dollar amount. These are all really good, but really expensive projects. So just to keep that in mind of the dollar amount versus what's on this list. But I will say, this is the MPO's list of priorities. So we can put whatever we want on here, but we just need to remember that's sort of the dollar amount when we provide this list to Region 4 that then feeds up into the statewide list. Yes.
So I've got several comments, but I want to start with this one. Just because it's on this list doesn't mean it gets on the 10-year plan.
Correct.
10-year list. So that's the disconnect for me, right? Here as a region, we'll say these are our priority, but the state might say, no, they're not your priorities. And I'm not picking on the state. I was there. I get it. I understand it. But
Leave the picking on the state to me, John.
I like everybody still over there, so I gotta be really careful, but I gotta ask the question. So that's what I brought up, is making sure that what we're putting as our priority projects, right, that we're doing it. Second, I will tell you, if we go away from corridors, I will be the most mad person on this council. After $1.8 billion on I-25 over the last 10 years and only $85 million from locals, see that Region Greeley's bringing $55 million for $100 million and we're not saying anything. So if these corridors go away, that means all the years that Greeley's been sitting there saying yes to 25, right, starts coming to 34, and then all of a sudden Greeley and Webb County are going, oh, we're gonna switch the way we do business now. We're done with 25. Loveland, Berthoud, or Collins, Lamar County, thank you very much. Let's change that now. So that's just so you know, you can tell in my voice and my passion that that's going to be a very hard hoop for me to jump if we change schemes at this point in time.
You can tell our friends at TAC that I simply will not be supportive of that. That's wrong. Please.
So one of the things I would say is that they did actually listen to the priorities in the 10-year plan, which was I-25.
Yeah.
So in that first round, they absolutely listened to the North Front Range about what our priorities were. Can't guarantee anything going forward, but they at least did listen to the first round.
Well, if you go back to that index of disproportionately and all the other things that we got to deal with, there's a lot of that over there in Greeley that has to get to the jobs and get to the urban centers. They get to places, and if we all of a sudden tell them they're not important to get to I-25, to get to Mustang, to get to Denver, because I promise you, Denver is not, brick and mortar is not from Denver, they're from up here, right? Things that are being built downtown Denver aren't from people that live in Denver. They're from people that live up here, right? And we gotta make sure that we're focusing on that percentage of people that are moving up and down those corridors that might not be in that corridor, and might not be, but they are using that corridor.
I'm curious about intersection improvements. Am I to understand correctly that they have put intersection improvements above Tier 1 projects? Help me understand that.
No, intersection improvements, they just wanted it on the tier. That was a suggestion to put it on the Tier 1 list.
Okay.
Now, whether or not those intersections are already included in projects is to be determined.
County Road 17 could be on 34, could be part of that.
Yeah, because those projects they're still in the prioritization phase. So it could be they're already reflected on here. Or on Tier 2.
So to tell me, to that end, help me understand, use 17 and 34 as an example. Because from a functionality, that intersection's dead. It's just fried. So help me understand where it falls into TAG's recommendation.
So there wasn't anything done with the prioritization of the projects until we get to the very last project. So everything else is the same priority that it was with the previous list that was updated when we did the with P3 or without P3 prior to the TC taking action on segment 5. So the prioritization has not changed other than the 2 projects for Greeley were combined, so now it looks like
So
there's
these are in
fewer.
priority order?
The previous priority order.
All right,
Yes.
these aren't, okay, these are in previous priority order.
Correct, the 2022 list, minus the intersection improvements, because that was just added at the bottom. Yeah. And then 2 were taken out and moved to tier 3, to tier 2. There was one moved to tier 3, but that's a different one. Tier 2, that was the ultimate configuration for Spaghetti Junction, based on the comments we got from CDOT on this interim. And then the other 34 and 17, there was a separate one that we also moved because this is interim and that's a final configuration, so.
With those type of intersections, does HSIP money come into play from CDOT?
It could.
Master, HSIP, all of those. I mean, a lot of times it has to have that cost benefit ratio of, what is it, 2.0 to get on faster, and then it's gotta be 0.25 to get on HSIP.
Okay.
But that intersection prioritization program that they're running is probably based on a faster calculation more than HSIP, because faster has $50 million a year in it, and it's not $1 million.
Yeah, and the HSIP, again, that would be the local community submitting that application to CDOT. Yeah, this is just for the 10-year list. Yeah.
So I'm looking at this list and hearing the discussion, and when I look at this tier 1 list, if we're talking about we're gonna stick with corridors, which I've heard half of the council say that they want to stick with corridors, and I'm looking at this tier 1 list, it's I-25 and it's US 34.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. So we have a couple of I-25 projects left on here, and we have some US 34 projects. So if you just thinking about what's on this list, does that make sense for the council to say, we want to stick with the corridors, and these are the corridors that we're interested in?
About 387, were there any projects from 387?
Not on the tier 1.
Not tier 1.
Now, the grade separation stuff was moved into tier 2?
For what?
The ones that were, sorry, I apologize. So these first 2 here, no, that's not it. This one here was moved, oh, here they are, yes, these 2. It doesn't look like it's 1, but this very tiny one. And so the US 34 and Kenner 17, and then the Spaghetti Junction, those 2 were moved from tier 1 to tier 2.
Doesn't that blow them out of the water when it comes to the attaining of grants?
No.
No?
No, this is solely 10-year plan funds. There is nothing about being on this list that precludes any local from submitting a project to the grant. What is more important for projects being submitted to grants is that they're included in an RTP, and these are in the RTP, and that's a box that you have to check for any federal grant. Is it in a regional transportation plan? And they are, yes.
We stipulated this, that this was in the RTP, was in the long range plan. We stipulated this in the merge grant, but we were not at that time in the 10-year plan. So that's why we didn't get the support of that project. But one of the things I want to clarify, if you look at 34 County Road 17 here and the 34 in County, that 20 and 30 million that's up there, that's Greeley bringing the money to the table. That's not anybody else. Our team, we're looking at bringing that money to the table. So this 20 or 30 million that we're talking about, that's not CDOT. That's Greeley. We're asking to get the interchange for the full build out, right? We're going to spend $20 million to $30 million on this interim fix and come back and spend another 50 to put the interchange in. I personally, this is where Paul might differ from me a little bit, he's smiling because he knows where I'm going. I personally say, it's a $50 million job, we're bringing 20 million to the table, the only thing we need to is another 30, and we fix that interchange and we're done.
So you're done with 50 instead of 70?
Yeah. But there's a discussion, we gotta get something because it is dead. I can't argue with Paul that it's not, and Elizabeth back there saying, it is dead. I mean, it's, you could be from 17 all the way back to County Road 3 before you even get through that 17 times. Mm-hmm. But what's the right answer for the North Front Range? I mean, a signal's not gonna improve air quality.
Exactly. The right answer is not intersection improvements. What we say is tier 1 is our priority, it's our primary, it's our priority. Tier 2 is our secondary priority. I, as one of 9 or however many sit up here, haven't counted, have an incredible frustration with putting 17 and 34 into a secondary priority. When you take a look at an intersection that has a regional significance, it's that one.
So,
on into where the.
And $20 million of local money for it.
So
almost 50%.
So there's two of them.
Yeah.
There's two 17s and 34s.
Yes.
And the first one in the tier 1 is what you were just talking about, the fix for 20 years of the interim. And then what got moved to the second tier was a $50 million fix.
Interchange.
The interchange.
Yeah.
So the reason we moved that to the second tier was because if you're gonna have a 20-year fix, that's be on a 10-year scope of the
Yes.
10-year list of projects. That's what we stuck out on the second one.
I understand.
I mean, Fort Collins has no projects in tier 1 and only 1 in tier 2. I mean, I don't know, 2 in tier 2. I'm just saying, you know.
Yeah, can you help me understand how this whole list came together and that there would be so few projects from Fort Collins?
So the council in 2019 determined that of our regionally significant corridors, of which there are 27, that 6 would be the priority for this list. Because at that time we were given, like I said, the cap of 500 million for this 10-year list. And so those 6 priority corridors were 25, 34, 85, 287, 14, and 392. And so what the council determined at that time was 25 was the top priority. Let's get that done. Let's get this project moving and, knock those out. And then 34, and there were a couple of 34 projects on that original list. And then Spaghetti Junction was on there. But then that was part of the Upper Front Ranges list. But it did end up being on the state's 10-year list. So at that time, that's where those priorities were. And then, so when we went through the workshop that we held in January of 2020, those are the projects that rose to the top in the voting that was done with the council and the TAC members at that meeting. The tier 2 received at least 1 vote, but they are not prioritized. They're just in corridor order. And the tier 3 ones were projects that were part of the original set of projects, did not receive any votes, but we kept them on the list because at that time we just didn't know what was happening. And so the projects that were selected for tier 1 were those big regional projects. And so that's sort of the history of how we got to where we are. And in the 3 years since then, where we've gone through and reviewed the list, and then council has adopted the list, things really haven't moved forward until the TC did took action on segment 5, and then that's when a big chunk came off. And so these are the projects that are still there.
And Becky, to go back, kind of even on the edge of my memory, there was segment 8 came first, which was a nod to Fort Collins and Lamar County, as well as widening of 287, if I remember correctly. Those were all some of the things that were early out of the chute in the 10-year plan.
Yeah, this idea of corridors was before 19. The idea of corridors started in 2012 when we finally got the North Front Range sort of coalesced together, because it wasn't really coalesced at the time. And we all came together in a regional perspective, and 392 was built, Harmony was built, part of that I-25 corridor. Prospect was built, 14's on the list. what else was built? The bridge over the Pooter, the railroad bridge, all those projects weren't all part of the I-25 segment 8. So there's been $800 million in that location spent over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying what I was saying is if you don't keep it the corridor philosophy that we had, right? We sat back and waited knowing that once I-25 got done, that some of these other things would start picking through.
So to your point, yes, we started talking about corridors in the long-range plan way back, but specifically to this 10-year pipeline of projects, this was really in response to CDOT headquarters saying, what are your top priorities? We got money, where are you gonna put the funds?
It was the 10-year development plan in 2013.
Yeah, so this, like, where are you gonna put the money if we got money? Where would this go? And so that's where what Becky was describing was this whole workshop that we do with council and TAC and dot voting and all this stuff. That's where this list came from, is to give to CDOT headquarters and say, here's the North Front Range's priorities. And at that point, all the elected officials in the room that were doing that workshop said, we want to do it on a corridor basis because some of the other regions like Dr. Cobb were spreading it around to different projects. North Front Range said, we want to focus on a corridor and get it done. And that's why it was really focused on I-25 for a number of years. And now that we've sort of got most of I-25 done, the next priority on the list was US 34. Now that doesn't mean that 287 and 392 and all those other corridors can't and won't receive money. It just means that this is the list that we give to CDOT headquarters to put in the 10-year pipeline.
Thank you.
No, that's helpful to remember the history.
Yeah, and that it's hard, right? When you think about it, it goes back a long ways. But I think it was wise for the council at the time, and the RTD that was pushing it was like, I don't know why. Now I'm reaping the benefits or the loss of benefits on the back end, but.
And we can't forget, Johnny, the $85 million that we generated out of the locals on that.
85 million.
Take the same kind of partnership along 34, quite frankly.
Right, and that's why I'm saying we're bringing $35 million to 35th and 47th, and we're bringing $20 or $30 million to 17, and we're not seeing any state funding, right? We can't even get anybody to talk to us about it.
Commissioner Brackey, please.
Yeah, it's great to listen to the conversation on this, and again, thinking about where the region has been, where the state's been, where we are now, and then how is this an opportunity to look forward? And coming up with this 10-year plan and this list of projects has really been fruitful. I mean, from my role on the Transportation Commission, having these very specific corridors, including I-25, to just go after time and time again and saying, this is what we need money for, this is what we need to prioritize for, has paid off. And so, we are here in a very, grateful position to be able to say, okay, we have gotten the funding confirmed for segment 5 and some additional work that's there, but what is next? And I guess my encouragement to the group is, don't sell yourself short. Come up with what those projects are that need to move forward in those corridors so that the next 5-10 years can look a lot like the last 4 years. I mean, we brought a lot of money to projects in northern Colorado, including I-25, including, everything else that's on the list. I'm looking at the 10-year plan right now for Region 4. There's a lot of projects there, a lot of great projects. So my encouragement is identify those transformative projects and those corridors and things that are really going to stand up on that statewide scale and bring those forward. So I think we're in a great place. We've accomplished a lot. Obviously the work that's been done before was good. It paid off. And so thinking about how did that strategic approach work, and then how do you replicate that or grow that for the next 5 years or 10 years? So that would be my encouragement.
Anyone else? Now, do you want to use my voice or Johnny's when you report back to TAC?
Don't use mine.
I'll consolidate everything and, yeah. No, I will be sure to bring back the message from the council, which is corridors, and then, and it is a discussion item at the TAC meeting later this month, so it's not an action item there. So I will take back council's feedback as well as what came from the workshop and bring something hopefully more cohesive and a plan to the May council meeting. So.
Additional questions or comments for Becky, please? Thank you.
Good job.
Don't go anywhere.
It's me again.
You again, number 18, FY 2024-2025 Unified Planning Work Program.
Yes, so we, every 2 years, we develop a brand new UPWP, or Unified Planning Work Program. And so this time it is the FY 2024 to 2025 UPWP. And this is just the tasks that is at the link that's in your packet. And so the budget itself for FY 24, and we do the tasks in 2-year blocks, but we do the budget in 1-year segments. So that will go to Finance Committee at their April 20th meeting, and then where we anticipate that they will recommend Planning Council approval at the May meeting. A couple of things to note for this UPWP. We do have several new tasks based somewhat on IIJA as well as regional priorities. So we have a new Safe Routes to School task that we have in there, which is a program to help our regional communities apply for Safe Routes to School, as well as having a Safe Routes to School committee. Complete Streets, which is a requirement from IIJA. So these will be tasks that specifically help us meet that goal. As well as TDM, and this is where the TMO work and other things related to TDM will be housed and fall under that task. I've also expanded a couple of tasks. One is the Linknoco task for a phase 2, as well as the safety task. We've expanded that to include a variety of different items. We plan to apply for an SS4A planning grant for the region. So if we were to be awarded that, that's where this work task, that we would fall under that. I'm requesting that any comments that council members may have, if you could get those to me by next Friday, April 14th. This will be going out for public comment when the TAC packet goes out. That is a requirement that FHWA and FTA have requested that we do now, which I think is a good practice. We just hadn't done it before. So that will be going out on April 12th, and it will be out for public comment for 30 days through May 11th. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Questions, comments from Becky? Seeing none. Thank you, Becky. Okay. Under council reports, Transportation Commission report, Commissioner Brackey, please.
Great. Good evening. I'll be really brief given the time. We did have at our Transportation Commission meeting last month, we had a joint board meeting with CTIO. I see that Cecil's on the agenda, so he may be covering that for us tonight. So I'll leave that for him. We also had an excellent briefing on CDOT's safety program. And obviously all of us in all of our communities and all of us individually need to be doing everything we can to improve the safety on our roadways. It's heartbreaking every day to see the headlines and the number of fatal and severe crashes we're continuing to have. So CDOT is certainly putting a lot of effort into that. And I know all of your local communities are as well. But there's just so much more that needs to be done to keep people safe. So the other real quick announcement is CDOT will be having the 4P meetings for each of the counties coming up later this spring. Some of them are in late May and then into early June. So be on the lookout for those. But with that, that's all I have tonight, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Questions for Commissioner Brackey, please. Thank you. CDOT Region 4 updates. Heather, please.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's actually Josie tonight. Heather was on here for the most part of the meeting. She's on her way to go pick up a kiddo, so she's asking me to cover for her. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm going to make it really short and sweet for you guys, but I do have some project updates for I-25 segment 7 and 8. Some good news there. The East Frontage Road Bridge over Hillsborough Tributary, which is south of 402, it is tracking ahead of the opening schedule date of May 26th. So great news there. Related to that, the deck pour should be around April 12th. So we'll see that here soon as well. I-25 segment 6 also, progress is fantastic there. We have 78% of construction work being completed. So LCR 16, the off ramp there, and LCR 16 through movement under I-25 will have a 90-day closure starting this month. This is necessary because they are constructing a 5-legged roundabout and a new southbound on-ramp. So on top of that, we're also going to be rebuilding a portion of the West Frontage Road, also known as LCR 5. Bridge construction is wrapping up, and that is allowing for summer paving to begin. So we're ahead of schedule there as well. And related to segment 6, this is the last paving season before project completion in early 2024. So there is light at the end of the construction tunnel. Segment 5, the big one on everybody's brains right now. Lots of exciting news with this one. So Mueller was selected for our design efforts there, which is great. The project kickoff will be in late April. Contracting is currently underway, and design is going to commence in May, with the first construction package beginning in early 2024. The good news here is we do have the same CDOT contractor for the design team, and that is currently working on segment 6. So we're going to have a lot of great efficiencies there, keeping the same staff on board. Little quick snippet for 257. So from 34 to Chestnut, the bid opened on March 30th. It was below the engineer's estimate, and construction will be taking place this summer. And then one last note for me related to the Transportation Alternatives Program call for projects. I know I've kind of beat this one with a dead horse at TAC, and you might all be tired of hearing from me on TAP, but Region 4 received great interest with 27 draft applications from our stakeholders throughout our entire region. There was a total request of over $47 million, and we only have 11.8 available to award. But it is very great that we have this much interest from our stakeholders. So Northfront Range specifically made up 29% of the applications received. We had 8 applications from stakeholders in Northfront Range. We just completed our engineer review period with the draft applications, and I am, as we speak, working on sending those comments back to the applicants today through tomorrow. With that, final draft applications, they'll be due on April 21st, and we look forward to meeting with our scoring panel members in Region 4 to talk about the projects at hand. For Northfront Range, Chair Commissioner Scott James, he is serving to represent you guys. So we're very excited. We look forward to that collaboration ahead, and I think that's all I got. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Questions for Joseph? Thank you. CTIO updates. Mr. Mayor, you well remember from your time as mayor that the chair has the ability to set the agenda. So you have my word that your report will be up underneath the reports earlier in the meeting next time, because thank you for sitting here for.
Hey, you know what he did to me last time? I had to call him Bracky. I went at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So Cecil, you have my word that we will thank you for being here, and we'll move you up. Thanks for hanging in there.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate it. I asked Suzette to pass out, to hand out to all of you via email my 45-minute presentation. So I can get even
also
here.
Remember, the chair has the power of this, right?
Actually, I sent that out on purpose to give you the opportunity to see all of the detail that was in the presentation that Commissioner Brackey and I saw last month. I only want to highlight a couple, 3 of these slides and really give you the highlights here. How do I move up on these slides? Sorry, I'm technology challenged here.
You should be able to scroll, so.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. 2.
Maybe. This one was working. There we go.
Oh, okay, yeah, I gotta use the other fingers.
There
In just a quick history here, in 2020, CTIO started talking to Build America Better TIFIA program on the idea of a corridor wide financing plan. And the corridor wide, at that time, the definition of that corridor for I-25 was the southern end of segment 2, which starts at US 36, and to the northern end of segment 8, which is Highway 14 on the north end. In 2021, CTIO did submit a letter of interest to Build America Bureau, and with a letter of interest that we wanted to follow that kind of a process. So recently, with the idea of trying to figure out how to fund segment 5, we have been working with Build America Bureau to try to make that happen. We will be looking at documents. There has been ongoing negotiations for quite some time now to get that TIFIA loan. We anticipate that that CTIO board and the Transportation Commission will see those documents. We hope to have them that maybe even this month, but my guess is probably not until May. Those last final crossing the T's and dotting the I's. The request is for a $501 million TIFIA loan. And what that does is reimburses CTIO for $24 million, which is an expense incurred in segment 3, which is ends at E470. That's 3A. Segment 3, for those of you who don't know that segment 3 actually ends at Highway 7, and only segment 3A, which is at E470, is 3A, and that's how far that $24 million got us, was to E470. So this $501 million loan pays CTIO for that $24 million investment. It funds $154 million for segments 7 and 8, and $323 million, which is the future construction of segment 5. The total estimated cost of segment 5 is $430 million, and it'll be, you all heard how that's going to be a project using what Commissioner Brackey just outlined for you. The advancement of the creditworthiness of CTIO in order to be able to meet the payments on these loans, we are using the income from the revenues from only segments 2 and 3. And I think that'll be important here in just a minute when I show you not this slide, but the next one. This just points out, this slide, the different segments and how they're where they are now. Segments 6, 7, and 8 are now under construction. Segment 5, that shows that $323 million, and then segment 2 and 3. Segment 2 is now undergoing a transit and safety study, and that's underway right now. That is anticipated to be finished in 2027, and that'll be important here in just a minute. So right now, this slide, I think, is the important one. And I don't know, I hate to make you all turn your heads, but this, and maybe it doesn't show up here, that the black line on the very top line, that's the revenue that we're on. We know from history on segments 2 and 3 that revenue is pretty solid. That history is there. The COVID issues affected that revenue very little in segments 2 and 3. And that's the funding that's being pledged on this particular TIFIA loan. If you take a look, the gray bar and the blue bar, those are the payments that are anticipated. So when you take a look at the difference of what the payments that are going to be required versus the revenue, that's a pretty significant gap there, which means that we'll have significant revenue above and beyond the needs on segment 2 and on segment 5. And the 501 million.
Just an interesting thought, though. It just occurred to me. I would agree with the revenue projections. That's solid. But much like the CAFE standards continue to increase fuel efficiency in vehicles, yet our sole source of funding on a lot of those highways is the gas tax. We are trying to drive drive down our single occupancy vehicles. We're trying to decrease the traffic on the roadway. You see what I'm saying? We're trying to put people into mass transit. We're kicking our cash cow in the shin. Is that all a part of your figures? If we accomplish our goals of getting single occupancy vehicles off the lane, we're not going to have many here. We're going to diminish our revenue.
Remember that this is all toll revenue.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about.
But the thing is that when you take a look at the timing on this, trying to get those people off the roads with mass transit, that's gonna be there, but I don't believe it's gonna impact this either. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense, but it's
because people are still, we're not gonna get the transit to the point where we can get to where we want to be transit-wise.
But you might get your HOV3 more. You might get more single occupancy vehicles, but then they're free.
Right. This study has been, look, I didn't do the study.
Oh, I know.
So now we're getting to.
My concern was, and I should have tried to draw the parallel to the gas tax, because, but if we accomplish our goals of decreasing vehicles on roadways and decreasing VMTs, we're gonna kick our revenue in the shin.
I think that's all been considered as part of this revenue study. Okay.
Because this is the only hope that I have for transportation funding right here is out of your office.
Exactly. So that's why I'm here with the good news. I was hoping you all would
be here.
Yeah, exactly. So the key to this is, there's one more key to this. This is only segments 2 and 3. Segments 6, 7, and 8 go online here next year, 2024. That revenue will be added on top of this line. So what that means is that line is even going to be greater. The distance will be greater between the two. The thing that I wanted to make sure that I brought to you tonight is that, and then the other thing I want you to know is that CTIO's documents and what we have done with this program with TIFIA and is to develop the program so that it leaves the flexibility for CTIO to go back to TIFIA and to Build America Bureau better for additional funding when that study of segment 2, the safety and transit study on segment 2 and 3 is done. Now the timing of that is that we will have, when that study is done, we will have 2 years worth of revenue, actual revenue history for segments 6, 7, and 8. That we will be able to use that revenue then to once again go back to Build America Bureau for segment 2 and 3, and then the goal is to be able to have the ability the flexibility with what we've done here to take a look at segments 3B and segment 4. So those are the goals, and that's kind of where we are. I don't know what I've done here. I'm technology challenged, so. But that pretty well summarizes what I wanted to report to you here tonight. And are there any questions?
Please.
Yeah, Suzanne.
I know we've been working on these TIFIA loans for quite a while. Do you have any idea when we're actually gonna like see them?
When we're gonna close? Yeah. And that, we're as, we were hoping for April here. But I'm guessing it's gonna be sometime here in April or May. The end of April. We, as a board, we were hoping we'd see those documents and approve those documents at the April meeting. I haven't got my agenda. I think they were waiting until the last minute to give us that agenda in order to get it on there if we have that opportunity. I'm guessing May. We'll see them in May.
Do you know the interest rate you guys are getting?
I do not. I mean, I can find out. And if you, yeah. I'll be glad to ask that question and get back to you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Other questions?
You have my word. In and out of half an hour next time.
One other thing I think you all need to know that the board, the CTIO board is definitely wanting to make sure that flexibility is there for us to be able to take a look at segments 4 and 3B and all of segment 2. Okay, we're committed to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes, please.
I have a little boy who's been sitting in the A&W parking lot for 40 minutes, so.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I'd have been
Get
gone.
out of here.
I'd have been gone 40 minutes ago. Bring us back a root beer.
See ya. Just cost your root beer next time.
Well, we're driving to Breckenridge.
All right. I-25 coalition, I was not present. Most of you were though. Anything to report? Seeing none.
Josie covered it.
What's that?
Josie covered it.
Josie covered it, okay. That week.
We did not have quorum, and so we'll meet May 25th. And with regard to, the, people talking about we're not open for projects yet. We haven't created a process to be open to, a funding process yet, because we only have a couple $2 million. So we're gonna wait probably till we have more debate to do that. So yes, then at that point, then people like, the RAC could apply.
Questions? Front Range Passenger Rail District, I saw the mayor popping around, and Johnny, you're here.
I was on a plane flight and did
So
not.
no report? That's kind of.
Like it? Keep going.
Next.
I saw Will out there. Did he disappear? Post council member report. Will's not here. All right. Next month's topic, agenda suggestions, agenda topic suggestions. Please get those to Suzette's. And we will see you where we meet next, May 4th in Evans. And with that, we'll stand adjourned at 8:52.
Thanks for the pizza, Bertha.
Stand up, see if I still remember how.
All right, but I like to do that. I don't have to.
Say like.